Chapter 104. There were more than 10 monks dressed in gray, black, and green robes, representing their different identities and statuses in the temple. And in the middle of them was a monk dressed in a red kassaya. He looked dignified and had an extraordinary aura. His bald head was really bright, huh? Chu Kuanga carefully looked at the excessively young monk, and was suddenly stunned. This person, why does he vaguely resemble that handsome and adorable young man, Yang Fan, who wears embroidered clothes and a small hat? Chu Kuanga looked at him, and his mouth gradually opened wide enough to stuff a goose egg in. The ruffians beside him were also stunned. After a long time, one of them jumped up in shock and cried out, "Xiao Fan? Why is it you? What are you dressed up like? Are you acting in a drama? How dare you? This is the head of the White Horse Temple, Master Hong Shichi. Who dares to be rude?" A monk immediately jumped out and solemnly declared the identity of Yang Fan. The ruffians were even more shocked when they heard this. Yang Fan smiled and said, "Almsgiver Chu, fellow almsgivers, how have you been?" Chu Kuanga stood up in surprise and looked at Yang Fan from head to toe. He slowly revealed a bitter smile and said, "Yang, Master Shichi, your appearance is really unexpected." Yang Fan smiled and said, "Almsgiver Chu, this way please. This poor monk has something to say." The two walked to the other side of the road. Under the big locust tree, a group of monks and a group of ruffians looked at each other with dissatisfaction. There was a kind of unwillingness between them. One must know that these monks were originally ruffians. When the two groups of people stood together, they could naturally feel the aura of the same kind from each other. Since they were all ruffians, there was a natural sense of competition and hostility. Therefore, the two sides only exchanged glances and found each other to be an eyesore. On the other side of the road, Yang Fan briefly explained his situation to Chu Kuanga. Even a death row prisoner like Ma Qiao had been whitewashed by a single sentence from Xuehuai. He was not afraid of Chu Kuanga digging out any secrets, and it was impossible for Chu Kuanga to dig out any real secret. Moreover, he knew that Chu Kuanga was a person who knew his limit. A person who had been in the officialdom, especially a person who had suffered a major setback, would not have that kind of boring curiosity. He would not dig up other people's gossip for fun. He believed that Chu Kuanga would agree to his request, because this matter was beneficial to Chu Kuanga. More importantly, Chu Kuanga had been chased out of the 1,000 Bull Guard and had been homeless for many years. There was a sense of injustice in his heart, just like how he had been wandering in front of the governor's office of Guangzhou. As long as he was given a chance, he would seize it. Even if it was just to change his current situation, it was enough to make Chu Kuanga work for him. Therefore, Yang Fan looked at Chu Kuanga calmly, waiting for his reply. Chu Kuanga looked straight at Yang Fan and said, "After my brothers go, will they really become monks?" Yang Fan sighed and waved his hand. He pointed at the few monks who were slanting their shoulders and shaking their thighs. They were competing with Chu Kuanga's subordinates to see who was more mischievous and rascally. He asked, "Look at them, which one of them looks like a monk? Shave your hair and change into monk robes, so that you can compete in the name of the White Horse Temple. That's all." Chu Kuanga nodded and confirmed, 30 copper coins a day. Once they really enter the finals, everyone will be rewarded 10,000 coins? Yang Fan smiled and said, "Not only that, if you can make Master Xue happy, Brother Chu will return to the 1,000 Bull Guard. Oh, now that it has been renamed to the Fengchen Guards, it will not be difficult for Brother Chu to return to the Fengchen Guards." Chu Kuanga's body trembled, and his eyes suddenly widened. He looked at Yang Fan nervously and said with a trembling voice, "Really?" Yang Fan said, "In this world, there is actually no such thing as fairness. To Brother Chu, you have fought countless battles on the battlefield and fought with your life on the line. It isn't easy for you to be promoted in the 1,000 Bull Battalion. However, to Xuesher, if he wishes for you to return to the 1,000 Bull Battalion or even reinstate your position, it would only take a single word from him. The crux of the matter is whether he is willing to do it. Good. I will go with you. Chu Kuanga's eyes emitted a trembling light. In a trance, it was as if a layer of dust was rustling off his body. It was as if a warrior who had been sealed in a clay figurine had broken free from his shackles. He slowly stretched his body and gripped the spear in his hand. He straightened his back and his expression became solemn. There was a kind of exuberant vitality between his eyebrows. He stood there like a spear. This valiant general who mingled in the streets, because of a word from Yang Fan, had been reborn and had vaguely recovered some of his former glory. Abbot, this disciple intends to do this. Our White Horse Temple's original senior martial brothers specialize in Kuju. This disciple and junior martial brother Chu Kuanga will also join them. With senior martial brother Hongyi and senior martial brother Honglu, this disciple and junior martial brother 19 may not be able to win, but we still have a fighting chance. Let the White Horse Temple's senior brothers specialize in Kuju. They will no longer be distracted, and their improvement will be faster. Good. Xue Huai readily agreed and immediately called Hongyi in front of him. He puffed out his chest and said, "Listen to me. From now on, all disciples are not allowed to leave the White Horse Temple. They are not allowed to eat, drink, or gamble. Listen to your 17th junior brother's instructions at all times and practice Kuju diligently. When the Lantern Festival comes, show me your face." Hongyi quickly agreed. Hong 16 and priest Zhua came over and said with a frown, "Abbot, this disciple is old. Do I still have to play football?" Xue Huai said, "You are in charge of picking up the ball." Oh, seeing that Xue Huai had given his orders, Yang Fan said again, "As for this disciple, I will practice polo with 19th junior brothers group, but the horses—" Xue Huai patted his chest and said, "No problem, I will immediately go to the Ministry of War and ask for dozens of their best war horses. There is also a place we can practice in the open space behind the White Horse Temple." After Xue Huai finished speaking, he touched his bald head and smiled with satisfaction. "Haha, Kuju, it's just a competition with a bunch of women. Even if I win, it will inevitably be a little unfair. If I can show off my power in Kuju, then that is the ability of a man. Damn, in the past, I could only sit there and watch others show off during the Lantern Festival. This time, I can show my face in both Kuju and Kuju." This guy was a natural optimist. Nothing had happened yet, but he was already convinced that his team would definitely win. Chu Kuanga wanted to use Master Xue's power to return to the Imperial Army, so he hurriedly said, "There are no weak soldiers under a strong general. This disciple will not embarrass Master Abbot. The horses have not arrived yet, so this disciple will go practice Kuju with 17th senior brother first." Good. Go practice well. Whether or not I can show off my might at the Lantern Festival is all up to you. Wait. Chu Kuanga had shaved his head at this moment and was wearing a short monk's robe that was modified from arrow sleeves. In fact, it was somewhere between a martial arts robe. Before that, there were actually many kinds of monk's robes, and there was no unified one. It was only after the establishment of the Tang dynasty that the color of the official robes was limited according to the rank of the official. Moreover, the royal family of Li Tang also attached importance to Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, so they also made regulations on the monks' robes. However, monks all wore wide robes with big sleeves. There were very few short robes, and they did not wear them in front of their believers, so the imperial court did not set any regulations. Therefore, this short monk's robe suitable for competition was actually modified from the short robes of a martial artist. Therefore, even though he had shaved his head, he still looked majestic. Xue Huai called out to Chu Kuanga, pinched his chin, and looked him up and down. He asked, "You look so strong, do you know sumo?" Chu Kuanga smiled and said proudly, "To tell you the truth, when this disciple was in the 1000 Bull Guard, I was one of the top 120 warriors in the sumo competition and won the championship time and time again. Xue Huai's eyes suddenly lit up and he said loudly, "Good. Good, ha ha ha, it seems that we can also compete with others in sumo." Chu Kuanga bowed and said, "I am willing to serve abbot." Xue Huai had heard Yang Fan talk about Chu Kuanga. Seeing him so respectful, he patted him on the shoulder and said, 1917 has told me about your situation. Don't worry, as long as you bring me face, I will definitely fulfill your wish and let you return to the 1,000 Bull Guard. I am a boorish man, but I am a man of my word." Chu Kuanga's heart was filled with excitement when he heard this. He immediately cupped his fists and said, "Abbot, don't worry. Even if Chu Kuanga has to bow his head to the ground, I will bring you back this face." In his excitement, he performed a military salute. Xue Huai was not a proper monk to begin with, so he did not care. He was very satisfied with his attitude and nodded repeatedly. "Good. Good. Work hard. Once you succeed, I will not go back on my word." To Xue Huai, this match was only a matter of face. He liked to be in the limelight, especially in front of Wu Zetian. However, to Chu Kuanga, it was a matter of life and future, so how could he dare to be negligent? He thought of how there were so many masters in the sumo wrestling competition. If he were to lose, his hopes of returning to the imperial army would be dashed. Chu Kuanga said, "Abbot, this disciple is naturally not afraid of competing with others in sumo wrestling. It's just that there are many masters in every sumo wrestling team. If this disciple is alone, I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to fight alone. If I have a helper to look out for each other, my chances of winning will greatly increase. Why don't I invite 17th senior brother to compete with me?" 17. Xue Huai looked at Yang Fan and curled his lip. He shook his head like a rattle drum. "No, no. Look at his frail body. Cupping, bowing, and striking are all based on his agility. Naturally, he can compete in sumo wrestling. How can a sumo wrestler not have a good physique? With that body of his, it's impossible." Chu Kuanga said in surprise, "Abbot, you don't know that 17th senior brother's wrestling skills are godly." Xue Huai looked at Yang Fan in surprise. 17, you know wrestling skills? Yang Fan rubbed his nose and smiled shyly. A little. Chapter 105. Even though Chu Kuanga had repeatedly boasted about Yang Fan, Xue Huai still didn't believe him. He dragged Yang Fan to the center of the field. Since he had just fought another match, Hong Jiu was lying on the ground, pretending to be dead. His tongue was hanging out as he panted heavily. Xue Huai kicked him and shouted, "Scram to the side and pretend to be dead. I'll spar with 17. Xue Huai took off his monk's robe, revealing his muscular body. Not to mention, Xue Huai's appearance was dignified and his muscles were very strong. What was even more rare was that such a strong man's body wasn't as dark as Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga's. Yang Fan's skin was the color of wheat, while Chu Kuanga's was bronze. Xue Huai's body was extremely strong, but his skin was actually very white. A man that Empress Wu liked must have 3 conditions. 1 was handsome, 2 was fair skin, and 3 was no bad breath. Xue Huai met all 3 conditions. Xue Huai got into a stance and said to Yang Fan, "Come, 17, let me experience your martial arts." Yang Fan knew that Xue Huai valued his face more than the heavens. Although he was the one who asked to spar, he wasn't really willing to spar with him. Therefore, he repeatedly declined. This disciple would never dare to spar with master. Please forgive this disciple for not being able to comply. Xue Huai repeatedly asked, but Yang Fan refused. Xue Huai was helpless and said to Hong Lu, "Little Six, you come." Most of Xue Huai's disciples were actually friends he had made when he was selling medicine in Luoyang. At that time, they called each other brothers and would compete in wrestling when they were free. Although Hong Lu wasn't Xue Huai's opponent at that time, the two's strength wasn't that different. Xue Huai could naturally see the depth of Yang Fan's martial arts by letting him spar. Seeing that the limelight had been stolen by his 17th junior brother, Hong Lu was already dissatisfied. Upon hearing Xue Huai's order, he immediately took off his outer robe and walked forward with his back bare. He said to Yang Fan, "17th brother, come, spar with me." Seeing this, Yang Fan tore off his belt and took off his coat. While Yang Fan was taking off his clothes, Hong Lu boasted, "I've been following Luoyang's sumo master, Li Banzuo, since I was a child. I learned the art of hornbreaker, and after I grew up, I was fortunate enough to receive guidance from Chang'an's #1 wrestler, Master Jin Tanjin, nicknamed Optimus Prime. Today, in Luoyang, there are only a handful of people who are better than me in hornbreaker sumo." The other disciples did not give him any face. They laughed and said, "Since Sixth senior brother is so capable, why don't you stand up for White Horse Temple and participate in the upper prime sumo wrestling competition to bring glory to master?" Hong Lu waved his hand and said, "If I can participate in the competition, why wouldn't I? It's a pity that a few years ago, I fought with the ruffians of Gong and Lane and injured one of my legs, so I can't use it for long. I can still spar with little 17, but if I were to go on stage and compete with other sumo masters, I wouldn't lose face to master." Immediately there was a chorus of boos. Yang Fan took off his outer robe and, like Hong Lu, went bare-chested. Although his body was a bit thinner, it was still well-defined and well-muscled. It was hard to tell that little 17, who was dressed like a delicate young girl, had a very impressive figure. Hong Lu kicked off his shoes and stood barefoot on the court. He waved at him and said, "Little 17, come." Yang Fan stood still and cupped his fists. "Little brother respectfully asks for sixth senior brother's guidance." Hong Lu shouted and pounced forward like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. Although he had spoken in a magnanimous manner, he had actually wanted to knock down Yang Fan and show his face in front of the other disciples. Therefore, he relied on the fact that his body was thicker than Yang Fan's and forced his way forward. Yang Fan twisted his legs, as if he wanted to avoid a direct confrontation with Hong Lu. However, his movements were too slow. Hong Lu pounced like a tiger and reached out to grab his belt. Ah! As soon as Hong Lu touched Yang Fan's body, it was as if he had grabbed a greasy bottle. His hand slipped and he didn't manage to grab Yang Fan's belt at all. Instead, he was swayed by Yang Fan and stumbled forward. He couldn't stop himself and fell straight out of the court. If this was an official sumo wrestling match, this would be considered a loss. Boos rang out from all directions. Hong Lu's face and neck were red as he said, "This doesn't count. I was careless. Little 17 only dodged and didn't compete with me at all. Come. Let's compete again." Yang Fan smiled lightly and steadied his feet. He opened his arms and said, "Sixth senior brother, please." Hong Lu, who was eager to turn the tables, took large strides towards the middle of the body. Yang Fan, who was originally standing there steadily, saw that Hong Lu was still a step away from him. He suddenly rushed forward and grabbed Hong Lu's forearm with his right hand. His left hand reached for Hong Lu's crotch. He lowered his body and rammed his entire body into Hong Lu's chest. He pushed his shoulder in front of Hong Lu's chest and shouted, "Up!" Yang Fan lifted Hong Lu up in an instant and spun him a few times. He shouted, "Fellow martial brothers, catch!" He threw Hong Lu 10 feet away. 4 or 5 ruffian monks rushed over to catch him. They were pushed back 5 or 6 steps by Hong Lu's body before they could stabilize themselves. This move was called Flying Pigeon Spin. It was a wrestling technique of the Central Plains, the wrestling techniques of the nomads beyond the Great Wall, and the flying pigeon throw of Japanese sumo wrestling. It was similar to this move of Yang Fan's. Sumo wrestling was originally a type of wrestling. After thousands of years of exploration, all kinds of wrestling techniques were similar. Naturally, there would be similar moves. Hong Lu was thrown by Yang Fan. If he had fallen to the ground, he would have been in a daze. He would have been unable to wake up for a long time. Even so, he was held by several of his martial brothers. It took him a long time to wake up. As soon as he woke up, he saw the faint smiles on his martial brothers' faces. He couldn't help but blush. He struggled and said, "Senior brother, I've always liked to train new people." You know, as he said this, he lost his balance and fell forward like a drunkard. This time, no one helped him. Hong Lu blew his conch and fell to the ground, causing everyone to burst into laughter. Xue Huai was overjoyed and said with a smile, "Good. 17th Wang is really good at wrestling. With such skills, you can definitely show off your skills in the palace." Ha ha. That's strange. Just now, when Hong Lu reached out to grab your belt, I saw it clearly. His hand was clearly gripping your belt. Why did he let go of his hand and fall? You two aren't putting on a show for the abbot, are you? Because everyone was already exhausted, even though Xue Huai wanted nothing more than for them to immediately start training, he could only tell them to rest for a while. After lunch, they would continue training in the afternoon. As soon as everyone dispersed, Ma Qiao chased after Yang Fan and asked. This question had been bottled up in his heart for a long time. Yang Fan smiled and said, "Look at Hong Lu's expression. He wants nothing more than to fall and make me eat sh*t. Is he willing to cooperate with me and make a fool of himself?" Ma Qiao scratched his head and said, "That's true. If it were me, I would still act with you. Hong Lu wouldn't have such good intentions, but at that time," Yang Fan said, "if I don't get to the bottom of this, I won't be able to rest properly at noon today. Come with me." Yang Fan hadn't put his shirt on yet. He draped it over his arm and led Ma Qiao into the pagoda forest. He casually hung his shirt on a branch that stuck out diagonally and took a stance. He said to Ma Qiao, "Come, put your hand on the back of my waist." Ma Qiao said, "On the waist? What's so strange about it?" As he spoke, he put his hand on Yang Fan's waist as he was told. Ma Qiao cried out in surprise and stared at Yang Fan as if he had seen a ghost. He then looked at his own palm that had bounced off and said in surprise, "What did you do? Is this a trick? I didn't see you move at all, but why did my hand seem to have bounced off? It's even a little numb." Yang Fan smiled and said, "This is called the 18 Falls. It's a close-range fighting martial art. It's a martial art that uses the body to change shadows and take advantage of the opponent's momentum to make the opponent miss. It's a martial art that uses ingenuity to counter clumsiness. However, it's not just blindly unloading and borrowing strength. After dispelling the opponent's strength, it's also necessary to seize the opportunity when the opponent's old strength has dissipated and new strength has yet to be generated." Yang Fan demonstrated it to him again. This time, Ma Qiao could clearly see that Yang Fan's waist had vibrated a few times in that instant. There was a soft but strong force that easily bounced his hand off and made his palm slightly numb. This was because he didn't use any strength and only put his hand on Yang Fan's waist. If his hand had also used strength and Yang Fan had dispelled his strength and then took advantage of the situation to counterattack, the strength could be imagined. Ma Qiao moved his numb wrist and said in surprise, "Amazing. You actually have such a magical martial art. Just now, your waist seemed to have vibrated more than 10 times. Your waist is tough and strong. I couldn't grab you at all." Yang Fan said with a smile, "Now do you understand why he fell off? However, my waist didn't just vibrate a dozen times. It's not more and not less. In an instant, it vibrated 48 times. It's like a wave. You can't touch me, hee. 48 times. In an instant, it vibrated 48 times. Ma Qiao's eyes lit up and his saliva almost dripped down. "I want to learn. Xiao Fan. Ah no, Chief Master, please accept me as your disciple. I want to learn martial arts from you. I don't want to learn anything else. I want to learn this 18 falls of yours." Yang Fan said, It's not a big deal to teach you some martial arts to strengthen your body, but this 18 falls is not easy to learn. You are already an adult, your bones are hard, you can learn hard kung fu, but learning this martial art is very limited. Ma Qiao said, No, no, no. My body is strong enough. I don't need to learn anything else. I want to learn this 18 falls. Yang Fan was surprised and said, Why do you have a special liking for this 18 falls? If you want to talk about prestige, I will teach you a set of 3 Emperor Cannon fists. When you use it, your chopping fist is like an axe, your bursting fist is like an arrow, your drilling fist is like an awl, and your horizontal fist is like a beam. With your physique, if you practice it well, you will have some achievement. When you use it, it will be very impressive. Ma Qiao shook his head and rubbed his hands. He looked like he was itching to learn it. He said, No, no, no. What cannon fist? How can it be as impressive as the 18 falls? I want to learn this 18 falls. In an instant, my waist bounced 48 times. If I use this when I'm having sex with a woman, what will happen? I'm afraid I will make her cry for her father and mother. She will throw away her armor and lose everything. It will be a crushing defeat. Yang Fan was stunned. He stared at Ma Qiao with wide eyes for a long time. Without saying a word, he turned around and walked away. Ma Qiao hurriedly chased after him and said, Hey! Don't go. Xiao Fan, Chief Master, Master. Yang Fan said in a bad mood, Don't call me. If my master knew that I taught you this martial art just to show off my power on women, my master would die of anger. Ma Qiao smiled apologetically and said, Who said that I only show off my power on women after learning this martial art? I can also show off my power on men occasionally. Yang Fan said, Huh? You have this kind of hobby? Ma Qiao was exasperated. He said, What are you thinking? I mean, to show off in front of men, of course it is to show off like you did just now. Heh. Heh heh. Yang Fan turned around and continued walking. No, you have ulterior motives. I won't teach you. Master, Ma Qiao cried out in grief and chased after him relentlessly. Chapter 106. In the following days, the White Horse Temple became a training base. The monks began to practice bowing in full swing. From Hong 1 to Hong 15, they were trained by Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga every day. At night, they would fall asleep as soon as they lay on the bed. They no longer had the time to stir up trouble on the street. Only the caddy, Ijwa, seemed to be more relaxed than them. Wasn't it just picking up the ball? The ball would not always be kicked out of the court. Occasionally, he would move his body, eat more, and sleep better. Not only did Yang Fan teach the monks to play, but he also learned how to play. In order to get help from Xue Huai, who was not a real monk, Yang Fan deliberately hid his incompetence in front of him. He did not expose the fact that he was not familiar with bowing and bowing. Now that Chu Kuanga was here, he needed to cram on this knowledge and familiarize himself with the rules of this competition, especially horsemanship. To play polo, one must have superb horsemanship. Horsemanship was not only about riding a horse and galloping. It also required great proficiency in all kinds of horsemanship skills such as striding, running, jumping, turning, and so on. However, Yang Fan lacked even the most basic horsemanship skills. The last time he went to Mengjin to assassinate Qiushenji, he had prepared a horse early. He was slightly familiar with horsemanship, and the saddle was padded with a thick mattress. Even so, he almost fell apart after running wildly all the way. Fortunately, the Jinwu guards were not all cavalry. Qiushenji did not expect him to break out of the encirclement so decisively. Qiushenji did not have time to prepare a horse to chase after him, so he managed to escape. This time, Yang Fan was just in time to let Chu Kuanga teach him horsemanship. Every morning and night, accompanied by Chu Kuanga, Yang Fan practiced horsemanship. Chu Kuanga's brothers also followed him to practice horsemanship. They made many obstacles in the wide open field behind the White Horse Temple to practice horsemanship skills. Yang Fan had a good body of martial arts, but after a few days of riding, his back was sore and his thighs were bruised. Not to mention Ma Chiao. However, Yang Fan had a good physique to begin with, so he was able to learn equestrianism quickly and quickly master some of the basic essentials. There were still 3 to 4 months until the Lantern Festival. If he practiced like this every day, and with the guidance of a famous teacher, he believed that by the Lantern Festival, his equestrian skills would be good enough to compete in competitions. These days, Yang Fan also learned about the movements in the capital through the mouths of the shameless monks and his informants in Zhaoyu. The assassination of Qiu Shenji had not spread in the capital, as if it had never happened. Yang Fan was even more certain that the murder in the mountain village was not the work of the imperial court. The repeated cover-up of the people involved was clear proof, but the truth of the matter was even more confusing. He wanted to know the truth and why his innocent relatives and fellow villagers were killed, so he needed more information. That evening, the sky was full of rosy clouds. After a day of training, everyone was sweating profusely. Some did not even take a bath and returned to the meditation room to rest. Yang Fan was still full of energy. Seeing that it was not time to practice horsemanship, he went to take a bath. When he came back, he saw Taoist Ijwa sitting cross-legged on the stone steps in front of the hall, muttering to himself. It was hard to tell if he was chanting Buddhist or Taoist scriptures. Yang Fan walked over, greeted him, and began to chat. After a few words, Yang Fan cleverly changed the topic to Helan Minji. Taoist Ijwa beamed with joy. If you want to talk about this Helan Minji, she was a major figure that shook the capital, back when the Empress became Emperor Gaozong's Empress. Because her 2 half-brothers did not get along with her mother and son, she found some reason to banish them out of the capital. The Empress naturally hoped to put her own sons and nephews in an important position. With these relatives, the Empress's position in the palace would be stable. However, she had never liked her 2 brothers, so who should she support? Later on, the Empress's 2 brothers died in a foreign land. The Empress was not in the mood to recall her 2 brothers' descendants, so she changed her sister's son, Helan Minji, to Wu. He inherited her father's title and was conferred the title of Duke of Zhou. Helan Minji's mother, the Empress's sister, was exceptionally beautiful, not inferior to the Empress herself. When Emperor Gaozong saw her, he conferred her the title of Madam of Han. She was often invited to the palace and was exceptionally doted on. Later on, she died of a sudden illness. This Helan Minji also has an older sister, Helan Shi. This Helan Shi was younger and more beautiful than her mother. Later on, she was doted on by Emperor Gaozong and was conferred the title of Madam of Wei. In the end, not long after, she died of an unknown illness. Yang Fan's eyes flashed as he slowly said, "Presumably, the Empress cannot escape the responsibility of this mother and daughter's sudden illness, right?" Taoist Ijwa looked around and said in a low voice, We didn't see it. In any case, that's what the rumors say. If they get in the way of the Empress, then they won't have a good time. Not to mention the Empress' sister and niece. Even if it was her son, so what? Li Xian and Li Hong, the 2 crown princes, are both flesh that fell from the Empress's body, but in the end. Taoist Ijwa laughed and returned to the topic. This Helan Minji is talented and learned. Back when he was at the Hongwen Library, he even compiled 100 volumes of the spring and autumn annals of the 30 kingdoms and got to know many scholars. He usually does a lot of cultured things and has indeed done some things. But ever since his mother and sister died one after the other, this Duke of Zhou started acting strange. Helan Minji's relationship with his mother and sister was very good. But when his mother and sister died mysteriously, he probably guessed what the heavenly Empress had done. From then on, he abandoned himself to despair and went against the heavenly Empress. This Helan Minji is as handsome as a jade tree, and coupled with the fact that he is a duke, he has a high status and authority. What kind of woman can't he get? But he just happens to be dissolute, with all sorts of lasciviousness that makes people raise their eyebrows. He even— Taoist Ijua subconsciously looked around again. Yang Fan couldn't help but smile. Senior brother, there's no need to be so careful. Besides you and me, there's no one else here. Taoist Ijua gave a hollow laugh. Yes, this Helan Minji has some unclear relations with his maternal grandmother, the young lady. Yang Fan said in shock, the young lady? That's the Empress Mother, his maternal grandmother. The two of them actually. Taoist Ijua waved his hand and disdainfully said, in the end, they're foreign races. Etiquette is nothing but dog fart to them. Otherwise, why would the noble clans of Shandong disdain marrying off Emperor Taizong's daughter? That's fine. Although Helan Minji doesn't have much of a moral character, with the Empress protecting him, no one has ever dared to criticize him. But after he suspected that the Empress had harmed his mother and sister, he specifically made things difficult for the Empress. The Empress chose the daughter of Yang Xijian, the Vice Minister of Imperial Guard, to be the Crown Prince Li Hong's wife. Just as the wedding date was approaching, he took advantage of this woman's spring outing to rape her, forcing the imperial family to hastily choose a crown prince consort. At the time, the Empress was still protecting him. Later on, the Empress probably sensed that Helan Minji was suspicious of him and decided to kill him. After Madame Yang passed away, the Heavenly Empress took out a sum of money and asked Helan Minji to build a huge Buddha statue for her deceased mother to pray for blessings. In the end, he spent all the money on debauchery. Before Madame Yang's funeral was over, he had already invited many singers and dancers to seek pleasure. The Empress couldn't restrain herself and finally flared up. She announced to the public that he had committed adultery with his maternal grandmother and embezzled public funds, punishing him. Yang Fan cried out, "This can be announced to the public? It's often said that one shouldn't wash one's dirty linen in public, not to mention that this is the Empress mother and nephew." Taoist Ijua said, "Nowadays, the world is under the influence of the Hu people. How many people in the world still view them as scourges and fierce beasts? Besides, the scandals that Helan Minji has done have long been spread among the people. Even if the Empress didn't say it, everyone knew about it. It's better to be open and aboveboard. You should also know that when it comes to the Empress' courage, not even men can compare to her." Yang Fan nodded in agreement. Taoist Ijua continued, "The Empress dismissed him from his official position, stripped him of his title, and even restored his original surname, Helan, before exiling him to Liezhou. He probably knew that he wouldn't have a good time, so when he arrived at Xiaozhou, he hung himself with the reins of his horse." Yang Fan's body shook. Xiaozhou? Xiaozhou, he actually hung himself in Xiaozhou. What did this have to do with the murder in that small mountain village? Helan Minji hung himself in Xiaozhou, and the next year, the Peach Blossom Village suddenly appeared. Between the two, Yang Fan was a little confused. He seemed to understand something, but at the same time, he didn't seem to understand anything. He was born the second year after Helan Minji's death, and Helan Minji didn't have any brothers or sisters, so he shouldn't have any relationship with Helan Minji. Then, his father and those villagers were Helan Minji's old subordinates and good friends? Those officials who were implicated and demoted? If they were, they could have been killed at that time. But why did it happen 11 years after Helan Minji's death? There were 10 years in between. Wasn't 10 years too late for a gentleman to take revenge? This was simply inexplicable. The more Yang Fan thought about it, the more confused he became. Taoist Ijua slapped his thigh and sighed with emotion. The current Wu Qingxi and Wu Sanxi are the descendants of the two half-brothers who were banished by the Empress. The Empress doesn't like them, but they still have such power. If Helan Minji didn't insist on going against the Empress, I'm afraid that in today's world, besides the Empress, he would be the most powerful. As he spoke, He saw the reception monk accompanying a monk in black slowly walking over. The monk had a strange appearance. His eyebrows were as white as snow and his face was clear. He seemed to be quite old. Occasionally, a real monk would pass by on the side of the road. When they saw the monk, they would stop and respectfully salute him. Although the White Horse Temple had been occupied by Xue Huai and a group of fake monks who drank and ate meat and did not abide by the rules, the real cultivators still lived in the temple. The daily affairs of the White Horse Temple were also managed by them. Since they recognized this old monk, he must be an eminent monk with an extremely high status in the Buddhist world. When Taoist Yizhua saw the monk walking over, he hurriedly stood up and saluted. Yang Fan imitated him and saluted. After the reception monk accompanied the black-robed monk into the temple, Yang Fan whispered to Taoist Yizhua, "Senior Marshal Brother, do you know this monk?" Yizhua replied, "Yes, this is Reverend Sanjia, the direct disciple of the Dharma Manifestation sect's founder, Reverend Xuanzang." Yang Fan didn't know much about Buddhism, so he only made an "oh" sound and asked curiously, "What is he doing here?" "Look at him. He's heading to the abbot's meditation room." "Oh right, there seems to be a lot of serious monks going in and out of the abbot's room recently. Is our abbot really going to study Buddhism?" Taoist Yizhua smiled bitterly. "The abbot's thoughts are like a heavenly steed soaring into the sky. How can mortals like you and I guess what he's thinking?" Yang Fan deeply agreed and nodded. Chapter 107. When Great Master Sanjia walked into the meditation room, there was already a group of old monks inside. They all looked to be quite old, and each of them had a profound cultivation base. As soon as they saw Great Master Sanjia enter, the monks who were chatting and reading scriptures all stood up and greeted him. Sanjia returned their greetings with a smile on his face. The great Abbot Huai was bared to his chest as he leaned on the luohan bed, drinking wine. When he saw Sanjia coming, he looked at him with hazy eyes and beckoned, "Monk Sanjia, you're finally here. Sit, sit, sit. Let's think of a way together." Xuanzang had taken in many disciples back then. Among them, the one he valued the most was his youngest disciple, Bianji. Bianji was the most famous scholar monk in Chang and after Xuanzang. Among the 9 eminent monks who participated in the translation of the Tang dynasty's records of the western regions, he was the youngest, only in his 20s. Unexpectedly, Bianji's ill-fated relationship with Princess Gaoyang cost him his life and he was sentenced to death by Li Shimin. After that, among Xuanzang's disciples, Master Skimmer was the most famous and knowledgeable. However, he passed away in the 2nd year of Yongchun. After him, there were other disciples such as Yuanji, Daozhen, Xingzhuang, and Taixian. Some of them were still alive, but because they were too old, they rarely went out in the world. Master Sanjia was not the most famous disciple of Xuanzang, but he was the most active one. Xue Huai picked up his wine cup and looked at Sanjia. "I have invited many great monks, but none of them could come up with a solution. They all said that you have a profound knowledge of Buddhism and are well-read, so I invited you here to discuss and come up with an idea. If you can solve this problem for me, Buddhism will definitely surpass Taoism and become the national religion of the Tang dynasty. You will be able to fulfill your master's long-cherished wish." As soon as Reverend Sanjia took a look inside the meditation room, he saw that the people sitting everywhere were those whom he was familiar with, those who were knowledgeable and highly respected in the Buddhist world. On the couch, on the floor, on the table, everywhere were piles of scriptures, engraved, hand-copied, and even a pile of ancient bamboo slip. He did not know what kind of trick this famous mad monk was going to play. Feeling nervous, he hastily cupped his fist and said, "This poor monk does not dare to accept Huai Idashi's undeserved praise. I just wonder what abbot wants to do by inviting this old monk here?" Xue Huai was not afraid and told him his plan. Speaking of which, although Xue Huai was ignorant and incompetent, he was very talented in terms of imagination. Wu Zetian's plan to change Li Tang's life and change the world was known to everyone even though she didn't say it out loud. How could Xue Huai, who was the person who slept by her side, not know about it? The members of the Wu clan who were attached to Wu Zetian, as well as the civil and military officials who were placed in an important position by her, were all racking their brains to clear the obstacles for her. Xue Huai was also someone who was unwilling to be left out, and he also wanted to obtain a great contribution from a neutral position. He didn't want to rely on serving her in bed to gain her favor. However, Xian Rui's trick had already been played by Wu Qingxi. This fellow had carved a stone and thrown it into the Luo River. Then, he fished it out and said it was a heaven's gift stone, declaring that Empress Wu would rule the world. There was a group of ruthless officials to clean up Li Tang's imperial family and ministers loyal to Li Tang. As a monk, he could not interfere. Forcing the Taoist priests to believe in Rulai was just a small matter. He knew that this kind of action could only show his loyalty to Empress Wu. It would not be of any help to promote Empress Wu's ascension to the throne. Forcing the Taoist priests to believe in Rulai was just a small matter. He also knew that this kind of action could only show his loyalty to Empress Wu. It would not be of any substantial help to promote Empress Wu's ascension to the throne. If he wanted to do it, he had to do it alone. Xue Huai built the unprecedented giant hall, Ming Hall, and built the unprecedented Buddha Heaven. He even wanted to show off in the palace's festive bow fencing competition. He was such a competitive person. How could he be willing to fall behind others at this time? Therefore, he had a bright idea. He thought that he could find evidence of Empress Wu ruling the world from the Buddhist scriptures. In this way, wouldn't he be able to make a great contribution? Xue Huai acted immediately. He immediately summoned the eminent monks of various temples and asked them to think of a way. Although Xue Huai was mischievous in Luoyang, what he did was of great benefit to Buddhism. These eminent monks might not agree with his actions, but they were secretly happy. Therefore, they did not have any conflict with Xue Huai. Moreover, with Xue Huai's character, he would not allow others to oppose his idea. Moreover, if this could really be done, Buddhism would undoubtedly rise to a higher level and suppress Taoism. Therefore, these eminent monks really did their best. However, it was easier said than done to find evidence of Empress Wu ruling the world from the Buddhist scriptures. Back then, Buddha Gautama Buddha did not know that his disciples wanted to preach in the Central Plains and become the #1 sect in the Central Plains. Otherwise, if Gautama Buddha had casually said an ambiguous gatha back then, his disciples and grand-disciples would have saved a lot of effort today. These eminent monks racked their brains and flipped through the scriptures, but they could not find any scriptures that were beneficial to Empress Wu's ascension. In desperation, someone suddenly remembered that Xuanzang's eminent disciple, Abbot Sanjie, had just returned to Luoyang after traveling for 2 years. Therefore, they quickly reminded Xue Huai to invite Sanjie. To find evidence of Empress Wu ruling the world from the Buddhist scriptures? To let Buddhism suppress Taoism and become the #1 sect in the Central Plains? Abbot Sanjie's blood was boiling. He immediately racked his brains to think of an idea. Xue Huai was not a good monk, but he was a good leader. Seeing that Abbot Sanjie was thinking seriously, he did not want to disturb him. He lay back on the couch and even softened the sound of drinking wine. Sanjie sat cross-legged on a cattail hassock and closed his eyes to think for a long time. Suddenly, his eyes opened and he said joyfully, "I've got it." The monks were flipping through the sutras, some were thinking about Buddhist illusions. They were extremely busy. Suddenly hearing this sentence, they gathered around him and asked anxiously, "Sanjie Dashi, what did you think of?" Xue Huai was drunk and drowsy. Just as he yawned, he suddenly heard Abbot Sanjie say, "I've got it." Xue Huai immediately perked up and jumped to the ground. He ran over barefooted and pushed the monks away with his arms. He stared at Abbot Sanjie and said, Tell me, what did you think of? The horses that Master Shui brought over are indeed top-notch horses. With good horses, it will be easier for you to practice horsemanship. During the competition, it is not only your horsemanship that is tested, but also your coordination with the horse. This coordination is your movements and command. Only when you are familiar with your horse will you be able to execute your commands in time. Chu Kuanga and Yang Fan urged their horses to gallop. Slow steps, fast steps, fast steps, slow steps, they constantly changed the horse's stance. At the same time, they imparted their own experiences to him. Don't think of using force with a horse. A horse weighs 1,000 pounds. How heavy are you? You have to follow its strength and control it. Horses are intelligent. If it does something right, praise it in time. Pat its neck or touch its throat, it will be like a child and will feel very happy. If it does something wrong, you have to punish it immediately. Yell at it, rein in the horse's reins, or kick it with the horse's stirrup. Then it will know that it was wrong. You must not talk about it after the fact. Horses do not have that kind of memory. Haha, that's right. Later, ask Master Shui for some candy. Horses like to eat sweet things. When you reward it, give it a piece of candy. This childish big guy will be very happy. While talking, the two of them rushed back to the White Horse Temple. The two of them dismounted from their horses and walked inside, while chatting and laughing. Suddenly, they saw Shui Huai, who was dressed in a large red kasaya, hurriedly walking outside accompanied by Hongi, Honger, and a few other tall and sturdy monks. His face was beaming with joy, and it seemed that he was in a very good mood. When Yang Fan saw him, he quickly went up to greet him. Abbot? Oh, 17. Haha, you went to ride horses again? Look at 17. She is so capable, yet she still practices diligently every day. You guys are always saying that you are tired. Tired my ass. Only by going through hardships can you become a master. How can you not be tired? Learn from 17. All the disciples loudly agreed. Yang Fan smiled. Abbot, you flatter me. I have something to tell you. No problem. What do you need? Just tell me at any time. The Emperor doesn't need starving soldiers. I will naturally get it for you. Wait for me to come back. I have to go to the palace now. Abbot wants to go to the palace? That's good. I might need the palace's approval for this matter. Yang Fan quickly said, It's like this. Abbot, we brothers have been training hard for some time, but we still don't know anything about our opponents. It will be difficult to achieve anything if we keep working behind closed doors. Also, we don't know how strong or weak our opponents are or how they are used to playing. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will always be victorious. This is true on the battlefield and also on the court. Therefore, I hope Abbot can create an opportunity for us. It would be best if we can compete with the strong teams in the palace first. Shui Huai smiled. This is easy. Wait for me to enter the palace and see the Empress. In Jixin Hall, Wu Zetian read a memorial and a happy smile suddenly appeared on her face. Beside her, Shanghai Wanner saw Wu Zetian's expression and said with a smile, What interesting thing did the Empress see to make her so happy? Wu Zetian handed the memorial to her and said with a smile, Wanner has never seen this memorial before? Shanghai Wan'er took it and saw that it was Jiangnan's Inspector General Di Renjie's memorial. She quickly skimmed through it and Shanghai Wan'er said, Oh, Wan'er has seen this memorial before. Master Di destroyed more than 1,700 obscene temples in Jiangnan. He only destroyed one temple. Compared to his achievements when he was in charge of the Supreme Court, why would the Empress be so happy? Wu Zetian shook her head and said with a smile, Of course not. When Di Renjie was the Supreme Court officer, he punished nearly 20,000 people in 1 year. Everyone was convinced and no one complained of injustice. This caused a stir in the capital. However, in my eyes, he is just a capable official, not a capable official. Wu Zetian took the memorial from Shanghai Wan'er and lightly patted it, saying, and this destruction of 1,700 obscene temples is what a capable official should do. I am happy to have such a capable official, so I laugh." Shanghai Wan'er was surprised. "What is this logic? Wan'er is ignorant, please enlighten me, Empress." Chapter 108. The obscene temple was not literally a temple dedicated to the god of lasciviousness. Instead, it referred to a temple dedicated to the god of lasciviousness that was not officially recognized. It referred to a temple that was spontaneously formed among the people to worship all kinds of strange gods. There were temples that formed spontaneously in various places. The land of Wu and Chu had many temples dedicated to various deities, such as Xiang Yu Temple, Tong Shu Wang, Chen Fu Marquis, Wu Xian Emperor, Lin Si Marquis, Bai He Emperor, Chen Ba King, Lu Pensi King, Lu Ma King, Do Xing Emperor, and so on. The people worshipped whenever they wanted to. It was purely out of utilitarianism. These temples did not have any religious spirit or philosophy of life to guide people to do good. In this way, it would not only involve some fakes taking advantage of the opportunity to make money and use superstition to do evil, but it would also involve the issue of faith. Even though there were not many and obvious political activities using religious beliefs at that time, it would inevitably lead to a disaster if such religious activities were allowed to develop. Whether it was the 5 Pecks of Rice sect or the Way of Peace, it was a disaster that affected the whole country. The emperor of the Tang dynasty worshipped Taoism, and Wu Zetian worshipped Buddhism because they knew the great power of religion and used it. With Wu Zetian's foresight, she could obviously see the political significance of Di Renjie's actions. In her opinion, a few unjust cases were just a capable official. To be able to clean up the root of the problem was the ability of a capable official. Wu Zetian pondered for a moment and said leisurely, "The imperial court is in need of manpower. It is a waste to put Master Di in Jiangnan." Shanghai Wan'er heard this and immediately knew that Di Renjie was going to be rehabilitated. Di Renjie came from a family of officials. His grandfather, Di Xiaoxiu, was the left minister during the Zhenguan period. His father, Di Zhishuan, was the chief inspector of Kuizhou. Di Renjie himself was a jinshi who passed the Ming-Jing examination. Since becoming an official, his political achievements were outstanding and his official career was smooth sailing. However, last year, when the king of Langia, Li Chong, rebelled against Wu Zetian sent Prime Minister Zhang Guangfu to quell the rebellion, while Di Renjie was appointed as the provincial governor of Yu province to clean up the mess. Zhang Guangfu was proud of his achievements. When he saw that Di Renjie had taken over a large amount of resources left behind by the rebel army, he extorted bribes from him. Di Renjie did not agree. Instead, he angrily reprimanded Zhang Guangfu for killing the surrendered soldiers in order to obtain military merit. Zhang Guangfu harbored hatred in his heart. When he returned to the court, he found a crime to impeach Di Renjie. He had a high position and power. As the prime minister of the court, he also had the merit of quelling the rebellion. In order to appease the meritorious minister, Wu Zetian had no choice but to demote Di Renjie to Jiangnan. Now it seemed that Di Renjie's actions were in line with the empress' wishes, and he was going to be promoted again. Wu Zetian muttered to herself. Of course, she didn't say it casually. In fact, she wanted to tell her something. If Di Renjie wanted to return to the imperial court, he would need someone to recommend him and promote him. She would need to arrange suitable officials to carry out these things. Whether Shanghai Wan'er did well or not, whether the opposing voices in the court were strong or weak, the empress could only make further decisions. If the opposing voices were too strong, she could advance and retreat calmly. Shanghai Wan'er's power was extremely heavy. This was a manifestation of this. Even if Shanghai Wan'er was very obedient and didn't deliberately play with power, whether or not she was willing to help you, she could still decide your official position. Once your position was confirmed, it would be difficult to get promoted again. Sometimes, it was possible to stay in this position for a lifetime until you retired. Shangguan Wan'er was like the Minister of Internal Affairs. Because of these reasons, she could unknowingly influence the court's politics and influence the promotion and demotion of officials. At this time, someone came in and reported, "Empress, the Master of White Horse Temple requests to see you." Wu Zetian slightly raised her eyebrows. She said in surprise, "Master is here? Invite him in." As she said this, she put down the memorial in her hand. Shangguan Wan'er slightly waved her hand. The palace maids and eunuchs in the hall withdrew one after another. Shangguan Wan'er said to Wu Zetian, "Wan'er, go wait in the corridor." "Yes." Wu Zetian nodded. Her eyes flashed. She saw Xue Huai rushing in with big strides. Shangguan Wan'er. Xue Huai didn't dare to be rude to this official close to the emperor. He stopped in his tracks and bowed to her. Shangguan Wan'er smiled sweetly and said, "Master Xue." Wan'er's smile was full of charm. Xue Huai didn't look sideways. After bowing, he took a step forward and put his palms together. He solemnly bowed to Wu Zetian. "This poor monk greets the Empress." Wan'er lightly waved her sleeves and gracefully retreated. Wu Zetian stretched her waist and reclined on the bed. She smiled at him and said, "Why did Master come at this time?" At this time, Xue Huai's strength was no longer as fresh to Wu Zetian. Since Wu Zetian had opened the door to take in a gigolo, there was no longer any taboo. When Xue Huai led the army to attack the Eastern Turks, Empress Wu took a fancy to Imperial Physician Shen Nani. This Imperial Physician Shen was refined and elegant. His demeanor was very different from that of a common man like Xue Huai. Although he was not as strong as Xue Huai, he had a kind of elegance and refinement. Thus, he became Wu Zetian's new favorite. Xue Huai was still kept in the dark. But as Wu Zetian's first gigolo, sharing a bed with her for so many years, Wu Zetian's feelings for Xue Huai were still very deep. Xue Huai's position in her heart was still the highest, and the one she doted on the most was still Xue Huai. This was something that Shen Nani could not compare to. Xue Huai laughed and walked over to sit on the bed. He placed a hand on Wu Zetian's soft waist and gently caressed it. He said, "Empress, Huai has come to bring good news to Empress." Wu Zetian rested her chin on her hand and lazily closed her eyes. She grabbed his hand and gently moved it to her chest. She comfortably sighed and said, "What good news? Did your White Horse Temple also produce some auspicious sign?" Listening to her tone, it was likely that all kinds of auspicious signs that appeared in various places in the world were either far-fetched or fake. She actually knew all of them, and these things could not be hidden from her. However, these things were necessary to build momentum, and even more so to make countless commoners in the world believe in them. So it did not matter whether she believed it or not. Her attitude must be serious and welcoming. She had already done this kind of show too many times. She could not refuse, but her heart could not help but be tired. So, if at this time someone else came, even if it was a hooligan on the street, and said that he had discovered some auspicious sign, Empress Wu would put on a very believing and very happy expression. But in front of her own man, she revealed her true attitude. Xue Huai laughed and said, "Auspicious sign? That's right, it is auspicious. It is the biggest auspicious sign in the world, even bigger than the Luoyang God Stone. Does Empress like to hear about it?" When Wu Zetian heard that it was indeed auspicious, she felt very bored in her heart. But she did not want to spoil her lover's mood, so she lazily said, "Let's hear it." Xue Huai proudly said, "Empress, ever since Huai was bestowed the title of White Horse Temple Master by Empress, I have been diligently studying the scriptures every day. I have read all the scriptures in the Sutra Depository and unexpectedly discovered that Empress is in charge of the world. The Buddha, Gautama Buddha, has long been revealed to the world in the scriptures." As he said this, he gently caressed Wu Zetian's chest. Wu Zetian closed her eyes and comfortably enjoyed his caress. She even rested her head on his lap. But when these words entered her ears, Wu Zetian suddenly sat up. Her eyes lit up and she asked in surprise, "Is this true? If you want to rule the world, of course you need strength. But to sit firmly in the world, strength alone is definitely not enough. Without the people's hearts, the strong and the weak will gradually change positions." Now that Wu Zetian wanted to rule the world, she already had enough strength. The reason why she did not allow others to persuade her, and waited patiently at such an old age, was because her influence was not enough and she did not have enough control over the people's hearts. At this time, Xue Huai actually said that he found the basis for him to become an emperor in the Buddhist scriptures. How could Wu Zetian not be surprised and happy? Xue Huai saw that Wu Zetian was moved and felt proud in his heart. He said, "Yes." Huai flipped through the Great Cloud Sutra. It was recorded that there was a pure light goddess who once listened to the Buddha preach the Great Nirvana Sutra. Later, she gave up her heavenly body and gave birth to a daughter. She became a ruler to protect the law. Since there was a goddess who reincarnated and became a ruler, then empress, you can naturally also become an emperor. Hearing this, Wu Zetian was happy at first. But after thinking about it carefully, she shook her head. Xue Huai couldn't help but feel nervous. He hurriedly said, "What, is it inappropriate?" Wu Zetian thought about it for a long time and said, "Master, this story is really too obscure. It can't be used to educate the people." Xue Huai racked his brain to think of such a good idea to compliment Empress Wu. Hearing that Wu Zetian rejected this idea, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. He said, "This isn't enough to prove that Empress should become an emperor?" Wu Zetian smiled and touched his bald head. She softly said, "Master, I am very happy that you have put in so much effort for me. I am not saying that this story of yours can't be used. I am saying that your understanding is wrong. You didn't explain it clearly enough." Xue Huai was at a loss. He said, "What does Empress think, then?" If it was someone else, Wu Zetian only needed to give a hint or a look, and the other party would be able to handle the matter well. For example, Shanghai Wanner. But to a crude person like Xue Huai, she couldn't keep him in suspense. She had to be very straightforward in order for Xue Huai to understand. Fortunately, there was no one else here. The two of them were emperor and minister on the surface, but they were husband and wife in secret. There was nothing that couldn't be said. Wu Zetian said, "Master, think about it. The Tang dynasty imperial family worships Taoism. Among the three religions, Taoism is number one. We believe in Buddhism. It was only after we came to power that Buddhism was able to hold its head high and vaguely surpass Taoism. Tell me, isn't this the way to protect the law?" Xue Huai pondered. Wu Zetian didn't let him think too much. She straightforwardly said, "It doesn't mean that we can be like that pure light Deva and reincarnate as an emperor. Rather, we should say that we are that pure light Deva. We are the Buddha's decree to reincarnate as an emperor and rule over the human world. Do you understand?" Huai understands. How could Xue Huai not understand Wu Zetian's words? He nodded repeatedly. Wu Zetian said, "This Buddhist scripture is too simple. It's just a story of 100 words. The language is obscure and difficult to understand. How can it be used to teach the world? In our opinion, Master can gather a group of highly virtuous monks to write a commentary on this Great Cloud scripture. We can explain the Buddhist principles in detail and explain our intention to become emperor more clearly and clearly." Chapter 109. Xue Huai quickly replied, "Huai understands. Huai is really stupid to need the Empress to teach me such an idea. When I return, I will follow the Empress' instructions. In a few days, Huai will bring a copy of the Great Cloud scripture for the Empress to take a look." Wu Zetian smiled and cupped his cheeks. She gave him a light kiss and said, "Good man, I am already very happy that you are willing to share my worries. It doesn't matter if you do well or not, but it is enough that you have this intention." Xue Huai had not been summoned by Wu Zetian to serve him in bed recently. As Wu Zetian's gigolo and the uncrowned empress male concubine, he did not dare to touch women. As a strong man, he had long held it in. With Wu Zetian's gentle words, Xue Huai's lust was aroused. The little monk under his crotch rose and was about to press Empress Wu down on the bed. Seeing his passionate gaze, Wu Zetian's heart couldn't help but itch a little. She leaned back slightly, half leaning on the soft embroidered tent. She squinted her eyes and glanced at Xue Huai. Xue Huai understood, and was just about to stand up and take off his clothes when he heard someone call out from outside, "Empress, Assistant Minister Qiu Guan Zhou Xing requests an audience." Xue Huai said angrily, "Tell him to wait. Call him in." Wu Zetian sat up and fixed her messy hair. She glared at Xue Huai. Humans have all kinds of desires. It was unknown when it started, but in Wu Zetian's heart, the only thing that made her feel like she was on cloud nine was the desire to pursue power. Even though she was a little moved, Wu Zetian was not a person who could be troubled by emotions. She was not a woman who was bound by lust. The moment she heard about the important matter, she immediately regained her shrewdness and calmness. Wu Zetian comforted the indignant Xue Huai with a gentle voice, "Master, go to the back hall and rest for a while. Zhou Xing is here for something important." Hearing her words, Xue Huai knew that he still had a chance today. His anger turned to joy and he nodded and strode to the rear hall. Wu Zetian tidied up her appearance and sat behind the table. She picked up a memorial and looked at the entrance of the hall with a pair of cold and dignified eyes. Following a series of footsteps, a pair of black satin boots stepped over the high threshold. A clear voice followed, "Assistant Minister Qiu Guan Zhou Xing pays his respects to the Empress." This was an official wearing a crimson robe. He was a third-ranked official of the Tang dynasty. Among the various ministers, only the assistant minister of the Ministry of Appointments was a fourth-ranked official, while the other ministers were lower-ranked officials. The fourth-ranked officials wore crimson robes. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Xing naturally had to wear a scarlet official robe. Zhou Xing was just over 40 this year. He was of a moderate build, not fat or thin. His face was clear, and he had a pair of thick eyebrows that were slightly curved. His eyebrows were black and bright like a sleeping silkworm. He had a pair of phoenix eyes and 3 strands of beard on his chin. He gave off the elegant and free air of a scholar, but his cheekbones were relatively high. Seeing Empress Wu, Zhou Xing hurriedly went forward to greet her. The so-called greeting was just a bow. At this time, the court did not have the ceremony of kneeling. When the emperor came to court, the officials all had seat. There would be meditation mats in the Golden Hall, and the officials would kneel to discuss politics with the emperor. Only in the Song dynasty, when Zhao Kuangyin ruled the country, did the seats get removed and the officials stood to discuss politics. But when they went to court, they still only bowed. It was only in the Yuan dynasty that they started to change to kneeling. Now, they did not always kneel. Wu Zetian waved her sleeve and said, "Assistant Minister Zhou does not need to be so courteous. How is the case of Xiao Qiangjin going?" Zhou Xing took out a memorial from his sleeve. He bowed and said, "Empress, after this subject received the decree, he immediately interrogated Xiao Qiangjin, Gong Sai and Zhang Siming. The Luo province Sima Gong Sai committed suicide to escape punishment. The Luo province magistrate Zhang Siming and Su Jingye's younger brother Xiao Qiangjin were afraid of the heavenly might and confessed to many accomplices. This subject did not dare to delay and immediately returned to report to the Empress." A cold light flashed through Wu Zetian's eyes. She reached out a hand. Zhou Xing immediately walked forward and presented the memorial. He respectfully said, "At the back, there are the confessions of Xiao Qiangjin and Zhang Siming." Wu Zetian did not reply. She only opened the memorial and read it seriously. Seeing this, Zhou Xing took 2 steps back and bowed slightly. He stood at the side and waited for Empress Wu to ask questions. Zhou Xing was slightly nervous. He had brought down many people before, but this time, among the people he wanted to bring down was his immediate superior, the Minister of Justice, Zhang Chujin. Wu Zetian had ordered him to investigate the case of Su Jingye's younger brother, Xiao Kyungjin. She had smuggled goods and wanted to use this case to purge the anti-martial royalists in the court. Zhou Xing had also smuggled goods and used the opportunity to drag his immediate superior, Zhang Chujin, into the case. Zhang Chujin was no ordinary person either. To be able to suppress someone like Zhou Xing, how could his means be ordinary? Zhang Chujin came from a large clan in Bing province, and came from a family of officials. Ever since he was appointed as the Minister of Justice, he was known as a capable official. Zhou Xing had long wanted to push him down. Huai said, "I would like to invite the princess's sumo wrestlers from the palace Kuju masters from the palace and the palace to compete from the palace to the palace to palace." Wu Zetian laughed. "Master's appetite is not small. You specifically challenge the strongest team of the Tang dynasty. Aren't you afraid of losing?" She smiled and pondered for a while, then said, "The Imperial Guard's Ju striking hand? Sure. When I get back, I will instruct Xiushenji to send the troops that are preparing to participate in the Shangyuan Ju striking hand to White Horse Temple to have a match with you. In the palace, no problem. In a few days, bring your Kuju masters to the palace and compete with them. I will tell Wan to arrange it. But Taiping..." Wu Zetian sighed softly and said, "Taiping hasn't been in a good mood recently. I don't think you should go and try to avoid this obstacle. There are many sumo masters in the Imperial Guard. Let Xiushenji send them to you." Xue Huai rushed back to White Horse Temple and immediately gathered a group of monks to explain the Empress' intention to them. In order to work together, the original abbot of White Horse Temple, the current elder of West Hall, Sanshan, was also invited. Sanshan, Sanjie, Santhin, Faming, Fajing, Zhengjie, every one of them was a famous and virtuous monk. In order for Buddhism to suppress Taoism and become the #1 religion in the Central Plains, each of them became a charlatan and accompanied Feng Xiaobao, the ruffian, to change the scriptures. What the Empress meant was that there was no need to be secretive or bashful. She should directly say that she was the ruler of humanity who had come to the human world under the Buddha's decree. In other words, she was the pure light goddess. However, the goddess did not have a high status in the Buddhist world. She was clearly not worthy of Wu Zetian's position as the ruler of the Tang dynasty. Therefore, after a discussion among the monks, they decided to make some changes to the Great Cloud Sutra. In the sutra notes, it was stated that Empress Wu was the Maitreya Buddha in her previous life. She received the decree of Sakyamuni and was reincarnated as the ruler of the world. In the sutra notes, monk Xingjue directly translated the Sanskrit into "the one who stole only the clouds is surnamed Wu," and "this is the divine emperor's mother descends upon all nations and gives birth to millions of people." In a very blatant manner, he used the name of Buddha to make the divine emperor with the surname Wu to proclaim himself as the emperor and mother descends upon all nations. At that time, Wu Zetian was in control of the court. As a woman and the Empress Dowager, the two biggest problems she faced if she wanted to proclaim herself as the emperor were the problem of her womanhood and surname. The emperor had always regarded himself as the son of heaven. If Empress Wu became the emperor, it would be the will of heaven. All these problems would naturally be solved. Faming and Fajing were responsible for making up various prophecies. Once these things were spread, the common people would be very willing to believe them. The prophecies they made up were very short in order to make it easier to spread. Each prophecy explained one problem, such as the reincarnation of the Maitreya Buddha as a woman, or the change of the surname Li to the surname Wu. The two eminent monks, Sanshan and Santhin, were responsible for collecting auspicious signs and warnings from various places. They forcefully linked them to Wu Zetian becoming the emperor. Not only did they list in detail all kinds of strange signs that appeared in various places in the Tang dynasty, such as a stone with a red heart, a rooster that could lay eggs, a stone that appeared in the Luo River, and so on. They even included earthquakes. They said that these were warnings from heaven and should be the evidence of Empress Wu becoming the emperor. Great Master Sanjia became the chief editor. He was responsible for the final collation and proofreading of the things made up by these eminent monks. Speaking of which, although Xue Huai was ignorant and incompetent, his imagination was far beyond that of an ordinary person. He was lying on the bed alone, drinking wine and humming a little tune. Suddenly, he slapped his head. He actually thought of an idea to help Empress Wu. He thought of a little song. The name of this song was Lady Wu Mainyang. Lady Wu Mainyang was a song that had existed for a long time. During the Sui dynasty and the early Tang dynasty, some records of palace banquets mentioned that this song was sung to liven things up. Apart from the fact that the name of this song coincided with the title, Lady Wu, bestowed upon Wu Zetian by Taizong, the two had nothing to do with each other at all. Xue Huai was also humming a tune randomly. When he was humming this tune, he thought of it. When Xue Huai brought up this idea, Great Master Sanjia expressed his approval. Hence, he made up an easy-to-understand lyrics to accompany this tune. Xue Huai then arranged for people to sing it in the marketplace. With such a large group of monks busy in the meditation room, it was necessary to have someone by their side to take care of them. Moreover, they also needed someone who knew how to read. All the monks in the temple who were free were all sent over. Because there was a shortage of manpower, and monk Yizhuo was literate, Xue Huai also found him to be a strong man. Yizhuo was a Taoist. When he saw these sanctimonious Buddhist monks spouting nonsense, Taoism's position was in jeopardy. His heart ached and he felt very uncomfortable. Therefore, during the day, Yizhuo served the monks with soup and water, watching them spout nonsense. At night, he would use charcoal and waste paper to carefully record everything he saw and heard during the day. He even gave the things he wrote a name, records of the birth of the great cloud scripture. After writing a page, he would go into the pagoda forest and find a secret place to hide it. He would write it every day, waiting for the day when the ugly faces of these high monks would be exposed to the world. Those high monks would never have thought that they would have a Taoist spy by their side. Every day, he would be unscrupulous and even indulge in his writing. Writing the scripture was not an easy task. Although they forcefully linked the matter of the pure light goddess with Wu Zetian to win the trust of the world, the more meticulous and realistic the scripture was, the better it would be. Once it was written, it had to be reconsidered. This was a long process. Xue Huai was illiterate. In the beginning, he was able to chat with them enthusiastically, but later on, even Xue Huai was confused. Gradually, he began to feel bored, so he entrusted this matter to Sanjia, Faming, and a few other eminent monks, while he went to watch the disciples do the kuju. Wu Zetian had agreed to let the imperial guards practice and compete with them. With an internal decree, Qiushenji, who was in Mengjin, naturally agreed. How could the empress' decree be disobeyed? Moreover, Qiushenji's bow-striking experts were selected from the various imperial guards. They all had a certain background. Although the White Horse Temple was notorious, they would not dare to do anything too vile to compete with these people. Qiushenji was a bow-striking expert when he was young. When Li Shimin introduced bow-striking in the Tang dynasty, he was one of the main bow-striking experts in the Tang dynasty's imperial guards. Although he was old now, he was still good at it. Every year during the Lantern Festival, the imperial guards would participate in the bow-striking competition. He was the one who coordinated the bow-striking experts from each Imperial Guard and trained them together. In modern terms, he was the chief coach of the Imperial Guard's bow-striking team. We've seen too many officialdom dramas. It seems that high officials and nobles are more serious than the next, more serious than the next. It's like this in the officialdom, and it's also like this in life. To their friends, colleagues, and relatives, they all put on the airs of an official all day long, living like they're not human at all. In fact, when they drink, dance, talk, and laugh, they are no different from us. They also have many personal hobbies. Chioshinji was a person who loved bow striking. In his original plan, because the Lantern Festival was approaching, he had already planned to communicate with the other Imperial Guards to transfer their bow-striking experts and gather them together for training. Now that the decree from Empress Wu came, it was convenient for both sides. However, because the people he transferred were from various Imperial Guards, it would take a few days to gather them together. Xue Huai waited for 2 days, but Chioshinji still did not send anyone over. He could not wait any longer, so he took his people to the palace to find Shanghai Wanner. Chapter 111. Among Xue Huai's trusted disciples, there were a few who had followed him to the palace. Most of the others had never been there before. Therefore, they were all very excited to be able to enter the palace. They were full of curiosity about the most honorable place in the world. Ma Qiao was no exception. Although the palace was in Luoyang City and was very close to him, he had thought that he would never be able to step into that place in his entire life. But now, he actually had the chance to enter the 9-layer Imperial Palace. It really felt like a dream. Yang Fan was also very nervous and a little excited. He didn't expect to have the opportunity to enter the palace so soon. Xue Huai had said that the Kuju masters in the palace were mostly women, such as princesses, female guards, and palace maids. Even Shangguan Daizhao was among them. Would he be able to see her this time? If he had the chance to see her, how would he be able to ask for the whereabouts of Miaoshenka? Because he was thinking about these questions, Yang Fan was a little silent. The others were discussing excitedly, guessing the situation in the palace, or listening to the senior and junior brothers who had accompanied Xue Huai to the palace talk about the situation in the palace. Yang Fan's behavior was a little different from others. Chu Kuanga saw this and thought that he was too nervous because he was concerned about winning or losing. After all, these teams were all formed by Yang Fan. The outcome of the competition had the most to do with him. Therefore, it was understandable that his performance was unusual. Chu Kuanga hurried 2 steps forward and patted him on the shoulder, comforting him. Erlang, don't worry. How long have you and I trained these people? In the past, they were not qualified to compete in the palace. Now, as long as they can hold on for a little longer, it will be your great ability. Moreover, with your superb Kuju skills, I really don't believe that some women can be stronger than you. Yang Fan laughed and said, Brother Chu is right. They are just a group of women. We are men, how can we be afraid of them? The two of them chatted and laughed as they walked forward with their arms around each other's shoulders. When they were about to reach the Lu Shun Square, suddenly they saw a group of people on horses coming slowly from the opposite direction. In front of the group were several government officials who were beating the gong to open the way and playing the signboard to clear the way. Behind them, there were many government officials holding their sabers and following them. Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong rode on his horse with his saber in his hand. Behind him were many officials. Unexpectedly, Xue Huai led a group of monks towards them. The officials were startled and immediately retreated to the side of the road to let the group of monks pass. Chapter 112. Shui Huai was originally worried that his scoundrels wouldn't know the rules after entering the palace and would cause some trouble. He didn't expect these palace maids and beauties to be even more daring than these scoundrels. This was the palace, the home of the palace maids and beauties. They didn't have to worry that someone would dare to be rude to them. More importantly, they had a lot of people. Experienced people knew that if a person was thrown into a group of the opposite sex, even a rooster would become a quail. As a result, the monks became the target of the palace maids and beauties' comments. They generously gave them pointers and giggled from time to time. Even the most ruffian and scoundrel monks became a little reserved under their giggles. Usually, when these monks went out on the streets and saw some pretty girls and wives, they would often point at them and make comments about them. But now there were several times more women than them, and all of them were beautiful, young, and lively girls. They were at a loss of what to do. The one who received the most attention was, of course, the handsome young monk Yang Fan. Many of the palace maids' eyes were red and sparkled as they looked at him. Yang Fan, on the other hand, was looking at the women playing football in the field. These women were fighting too fiercely. Although they knew that a group of monks had come to the palace, they couldn't find the time to watch the fun. They wore light green shirts with large lapels and narrow sleeves. Their shirts reached their knees and were tied tightly with belts that bound their slender waists. 2 straps hung down from their waists and stuck to their perky buttocks. As they ran, the straps bounced and slapped their plump buttocks. They all wore a pair of striped skinny pants that were the same color as their shirt. Some of the pants were tied up, while others were stuffed into their boot. The palace maids tied up their pants were because they wore a pair of wooden clogs on their feet and had no boots to stuff in. From this, one could also infer their general status in the palace, because playing football required a lot of shoes. In that era, there were no football shoes or rubber-soled shoes. Whether it was cloth shoes or leather shoes, they were not particularly sturdy. After a game of football, the shoes with poor quality would become a joke, and the shoes with good quality would also have some places where they would fall off. Although it was the prosperous era of the Tang dynasty, most people didn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, not having to worry about food and clothing didn't mean everything. At that time, the handicraft industry wasn't developed. Shoes had to be made one needle at a time. Making shoes was more time-consuming than making clothes, so it wasn't cheap. Therefore, unless one was rich, most people played football barefoot or wore wooden clogs. After all, the palace maids were girls, so it was impossible for them to play football barefoot. Therefore, those with high status and high salary would wear boots, while the other palace maids wore wooden clogs. The feeling of wooden clogs was far less sensitive than cloth shoes or leather boots, so they were at a disadvantage when playing football. Therefore, even if their skills were similar, or even if your skills were slightly better, the person wearing wooden clogs would still be slightly worse than the person wearing cloth shoes or leather boot. However, among the dozen or so people playing football on the field at that moment, the one with the best skills was clearly a girl wearing wooden clogs. If she changed into a pair of leather boots, what would her skills be like? Yang Fan was looking at her. This time, Yang Fan entered the palace to compare his skills with the Kuju masters in the palace. This was directly related to whether he would be able to enter the palace often in the future and have the opportunity to meet a big shot like Shanghai Wanner. Therefore, he paid special attention to the Kuju masters in the palace. This girl wearing wooden clogs had her hair combed into 3 servant girls. She was quiet and beautiful. She was also wearing a green shirt and trousers, and on her body she exuded a kind of vigorous and neat feeling. Her feet were wearing a pair of simple wooden clogs, and the rubber ball was on the tip of her foot. No matter what she did, the ball never left her foot, and her feet never left the ball. Her skills were truly superb. They were playing for nothing. Playing for nothing meant that there was no goal. It was a competition game that focused purely on footwork skills. It required extremely high control of the feet, and after playing for a game, it consumed a lot of physical strength. In the Tang dynasty, it could be said that the whole nation played football. From the emperor's imperial concubines, princes and nobles to the common people and footmen, everyone loved to play for a long time. In such an atmosphere, there were many hardcore fans like Shui Huai, and there were also many people with superb skills. None of the palace maids on the field were weak. It was especially rare for this girl wearing wooden clogs to be able to beat the group of palace maids. This girl was Siemuan. Among the female officials, female guards, and palace maids in the palace, she could be considered a rich woman. The reason why she still wore wooden clogs to play was that she was used to saving money, and earning money again. Nyo was afraid of living a hard life. She couldn't wait to earn all the money that she and her brother wouldn't be able to spend for 3 lifetimes in one go. Because of this, she was nicknamed Little Miser among her sisters. Yang Fan noticed her because of her superb skills, and then began to look at her. After looking at her for a while, Yang Fan faintly felt a sense of familiarity. Although Xie Xiaoman's current attire was a far cry from the fairy-like image from that night, beautiful women were always unforgettable. Especially her heroic eyebrows, Yang Fan suddenly remembered her. That night, he had seen this girl while riding on the wall. She really was a person of the imperial court, and a person of the palace. Could it be that she recognized him? Xie Xiaoman seemed to be aware that someone was staring at her. She suddenly tiptoed, and the ball that seemed to be glued to the tip of her foot soared into the sky. She didn't seem to use much strength in this kick, but it actually kicked the ball so high. This move was similar to the one that Yang Fan used to hit the ball into the net from the center line on the Luo River. The only difference was that one used a hand and the other used a foot. Being able to exert the greatest strength did not necessarily mean that one could shoot the most powerful ball. Relying solely on brute force, it was likely that the ball itself would have to bear all of the force. Xie Xiaoman kicked the ball away and looked over. She saw a handsome monk wearing a large red robe, but he was unreasonably young and handsome. He was looking at her with a sneaky expression. She was immediately displeased and fiercely glared at him. She didn't recognize Yang Fan. In the ancient records, the person with the highest ability to remember people was a man named Ing Feng. Because of this, the idiom "half a face to face" was left behind. It was said that Ing Feng had an amazing memory. Once, he went to visit an official, but the official was not at home. At that time, the coachman only opened the door a crack, and Ing Feng only saw half of the coachman's face. Decades later, when they met again, Ing Feng was still able to recognize him at a glance. Of course, Xie Xiaoman was not such a strange person. Although she was not face-blind, she was not good at remembering other people's faces. That night, Yang Fan was hiding under the treetops. The light was dim, and Xiaoman would not deliberately look at a thief. Now that this thief had shaved his head and was wearing a kasaya, his appearance was too different from that night. She could not recognize him. As for the image of his childhood, it was even more different now. At that time, Yang Fan's face was sallow and emaciated. His hair was unkempt, and his face was bruised and swollen. Needless to say, their circumstances had changed too much. Adequate nutrition, a comfortable life, coupled with martial arts practice, and the way they dressed, it made their physical appearance and mental temperament undergo earth-shaking changes. Not only did a girl change 18 times from childhood to womanhood, a man grew up from a child to a young man. His living environment was also like heaven and earth, so the changes in his appearance were also earth-shaking. Nyo did not know that the lecherous smelly monk in front of her was the elder brother she had been looking for thousands of times. Even if Yang Fan broke his head, he would never think that this beautiful and pretty little female guard was the same ugly Nyo who had a bird's nest hairstyle and small open teeth. At this time, the ball that seemed to go straight into the clouds fell from the sky and landed 3 feet in front of Yang Fan. With Xie Xiaoman's ball control ability, how could she not know where the ball was going to land? It seems that when she kicked the ball into the air, She had deliberately chosen this landing point to scare the monk who was looking at her rudely. The group of palace maids gathered around Xie Xiaoman had just looked up when Yang Fan noticed something strange. He looked up and saw the ball falling from the sky. Yang Fan's feet stopped, and his pair of Luohan shoes sprang up. His whole body spun up. His big red kasaya was like a red lotus blooming from the water because of his rapid spin, spreading out in all directions. Yang Fan's foot flew out and hit the ball in the middle. The ball flew out and turned into a long rainbow, penetrating into the eye of the wind. The eye of the wind was the goal. There was a goal on the left and right side of the field. The shape of the goal was like a memorial arch, but it was much shorter than the memorial arch. The goal was made of red painted wood, with cloud eaves on both sides, and a pointed ball at the top of the middle. It was somewhat in the style of Western regions architecture. Below it was the goal, which was about the height of a person, similar to the modern goal. But according to different play styles, not all the ball had to enter this goal to score. Above the goal was not one beam, but two beams. In the middle of the two beams there was a smaller goal, shaped like a window on the wall of an ancient garden. This hole was called the Eye of the Wind. In some of the more difficult games, the ball had to enter this hole to win, and to shoot into the Eye of the Wind was several times more difficult than shooting into the larger goal below. Yang Fan's volley accurately and powerfully went straight into the goal. Moreover, he was on the side of the field, and due to the angle, it made it even more difficult to shoot. For a moment, the monks and palace maids who witnessed this scene could not help but cheer. Although Yang Fan had not competed with a real strong team in kickboxing, he had a general understanding of his own kickboxing skills. So when he saw the female palace guard he had seen before, he knew that she must be an expert in kickboxing from the imperial palace. In a moment, he would compete with an expert from the imperial palace, and this person was likely to be a strong opponent, so he intended to give her a head-on blow. When Xie Xiaoman saw his volley, her eyes could not help but shine. What a good monk, I can't underestimate him. Shanghai Wanner said, "The Empress is a little tired. She has returned to her bedroom to rest. She is listening to some scriptures to calm her mind." Princess Taiping knew what was going on. "Oh," she said, "if that's the case, I'll go back." Shanghai Wanner quickly stopped her and said with a smile, "Since Princess has come, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Teacher Shui has brought a group of disciples into the palace. He said that he has been practicing Kujia hard. He wants to participate in the Yuan Dynasty tournament and compete with us for the championship. Now he wants to compete with our forbidden sex Kujia masters. Wanner is going to arrange some people to compete with them. If Princess has nothing else to do, why don't you come with us?" Princess Taiping heard this and said with disdain, "Shui Huaiyi's subordinates are just a bunch of ruffians. What kind of Kujia masters do they have?" Even though she said that, she still followed Shanghai Wanner to the backyard. In the backyard, the two sides were still bickering. A group of palace maids were chattering non-stop. The ruffians and monks were speechless. Suddenly, one of the palace maids ran over and shouted, "Xiaoman Jiejie, Iching Mimi, don't quarrel anymore. Shangguan Daizhao is here. Daizhao said that he wants us to compete with White Horse Temple." Xie Xiaoman was surprised. "Shangguan Daizhao also knows about this?" The palace maid said, "This matter has been approved by the Empress. Shangguan Daizhao is here for this matter. Look." The palace maid pointed behind her. Everyone followed her gaze and saw two men in white robes standing shoulder to shoulder on one side of the field. Someone called out, "Ah! Princess Taiping is also here." Yang Fan listened attentively and saw two people standing shoulder to shoulder on the other side of the field. Both were wearing Confucian robes. Their lips were painted red, Their noses were greasy, their skin was delicate, and their skin was white with a hint of red. Standing there, they looked like a pair of lovers. If these two were to change into women's clothes, perhaps even Shizi Fian would not be able to compare. Carefully looking at their appearance, he remembered that the one on the left was the Princess Taiping whom he met by chance at the Luo River. As for the other one, she was as beautiful as a jade. Yang Fan vaguely remembered that he had seen her at the Luo River. At that time, she was standing next to Princess Taiping. So she was Shangguan Waner. Yang Fan did not expect that the person he had tried so hard to meet was someone he had already met at the Luo River that day. It was just that he did not know who she was. Only today did he see her true face. Chapter 114. Shangguan Wan did not approach. Although she was respectful to Xue Huai on the surface, she was very disdainful or even disgusted with him. At the moment, Xue Huai was not here, so Shangguan Wan did not need to show any respect to his subordinates. Shangguan Wan said to Xiemuan from afar, "Xiao Man, you and the others have a match. The princess and I will watch the match from here. Pay attention, don't let the reputation of the palace weaken." While speaking, a group of eunuchs carrying all kinds of things came over. The screen was pulled down, and in the blink of an eye, a place that looked like a tent was set up, and then 2 rope beds were put in. These rope beds were the same as Hu beds, both came from the western regions. Although there was a word bed in its name, it was actually a chair. This kind of chair with high legs and armrests was somewhat similar to the armchairs and armchairs. It had been introduced to the Central Plains since the Han Dynasty, but it had never become the mainstream of household furniture. But outside, the nobles had to agree that this kind of furniture was more suitable than the traditional furniture of the Central Plains. At least in the army, Hu beds, stools, had become very popular. There were also rope beds in the palace. Generally, when the members of the royal family held some grand events outside the palace hall, the traditional seat was too low, so they would use this kind of furniture from the western regions. After the rope beds were put in place, a few tables were placed between the 2 rope beds. Then hot tea, fresh fruits, cold dishes and snacks were placed on the tables one by one. Princess Taiping and Shangguan Wan sat on the left and right. They first took a wet towel to wipe their hands and face, then took a hot cheese, picked up some raisins, and put on a look as if they were watching the fun. In the palace, apart from the Empress, only these 2 people could put on such a show. Even the Empress was not as eye-catching. Seeing that Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao were sitting on the side of the field, wanting to watch the match, although Xie Xiaoman did not put the monks of the White Horse Temple in her eyes, she could not help but be excited. The palace maids and female guards were eager to participate in the match. Lan Yiqing waved his arms and said, "Sisters, cheer up. Let the monks of White Horse Temple know how powerful we are." Xie Xiaoman had always been friends with them, so she had a good idea of who was better. She picked out 9 of her friends, and with her, there were 10 of them. Xie Xiaoman still didn't take the monks of the White Horse Temple seriously. In her haste, she didn't deliberately find the best football players. At least, Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao were first-class kuju masters, but the 2 of them did not participate. But Xie Xiaoman still picked out the best players among the female guards present. Among these 10 people, besides her, there were 3 female guards, including Lan Yiqing. The other 6 were just ordinary palace maids. The quality of one's ball skills was not directly related to one's martial arts. Those who were good at martial arts would naturally have better physical fitness, but that was only one of the basic elements of playing basketball. It did not mean that they would be able to practice superb skills and make the most accurate judgments according to the ever-changing situation on the court. Therefore, although there were a few female guards present who had superb martial arts, their ability to play with the light ball under their feet was very average. They usually did not practice seriously. Occasionally, they came to play ball to relieve boredom. Their ball skills were very average, so they were not selected by Xie Xiaoman. Xue Huai was not here, so the White Horse Temple naturally had Yang Fan as the leader. Under the arrangement of Yang Fan, a total of 9 members, including Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, Ma Chiao, were selected. Including him, there were a total of 10 people ready to play. There was no point in hiding their strength. In this kind of game, the deciding factor was strength. Even if one's playing style was different, how strange could it be? Once on the field, the competition was always the most basic things. Ball control, dribbling, passing, shooting, and so on. Letting those who were really good at Kuju stand on the sidelines and watch was absolutely not as good as letting them go on the field and fight with their opponent. Although Yang Fan had never practiced Kuju before, he understood this principle. So he did not hide anything and sent all the best players on the field. Because this was a competition, it was no longer a performance of free play, so the palace maids and eunuchs had already cleared the field. They did not use a single goal, but a double goal. This kind of play was the most intense kind of play. The monks had already put on short martial arts clothes under their monk robes. Now that their monk robes were loosened, they all walked onto the field one by one and moved their hands and feet. Lan Yiqing stood on the opposite side and proudly raised his chin, looking at the monks' movements with disdain. Xie Xiaoman moved her hands and feet and whispered to her, "Those who come have bad intentions, those who are kind don't come. If they dare to come to Kuju, they must have something to rely on. Don't be careless." Lan Yiqing looked back and smiled. "Sister Xiaoman, don't worry. We won't let these stinky monks take advantage of us." Xie Xiaoman nodded and said to Gaoying, "Keep an eye on the monk in the red robe. Among these people, I'm afraid he is the most skilled." Gaoying nodded and stared at Yang Fan with her pair of limpid eyes. Kuju began. It was 10 months on the field. The fragrant wind blew down 2 beautiful women. Sweat stained their faces and dew. Dust brushed their eyebrows. Their green sleeves hung low and covered the jade bamboo shoot. Their red skirts swayed with dew. Their children would kick away their delicate and beautiful chong and youth. Competitions with girls participating were always particularly pleasing to the eye. If these girls were young and beautiful, watching their vigorous and beautiful figures running on the field and listening to their melodious shouts like silver bells, it was really a very pleasant enjoyment. However, the 10 Buddhist team members didn't feel the same way. As soon as the game began, they felt the power of these palace maids. Each of them moved like the wind and were agile, catching them off guard. Kuju at that time was actually much more barbaric than modern football. Some reasonable collision movements were even more skillful than these monks. As soon as the game began, these closed-door monks were beaten to a pulp by these tigresses. Who would have thought that each of these delicate girls would be so powerful? Steady. Retreat and defend. Get used to their style of play first. Yang Fan shouted. He and Chu Kuanga took the position of 2 vanguards, one on the left and the other on the right. They forcibly intercepted the opponent's offensive. Only then did the other team members retreat to their own half of the field. The disrupted formation was slightly restored. Damn it, we are a group of men. How can we be defeated by a group of little girls? Brothers, let's fight back. Hongyi, who had calmed down, shouted in exasperation. Unfortunately, only his subordinates responded to him. The monks who were standing on the sidelines waving their fists and cheering had long been drowned out by the cheers of the palace maids and eunuchs. They had no choice but to fight in an away game. Yang Fan intercepted the ball and stepped on it. He glanced at Chu Kuanga on the left and said in a deep voice, "Brother Chu, let's fight side by side. Let's show them how powerful we are." Chu Kuanga laughed. "I have only left the Imperial Army for a few years. I didn't expect that Kuju would change. Good. The 2 of us, let's show off the might of men. Kill." Lan Yiqing wrinkled her little nose and said, "Don't brag. Bring it on." Yang Fan laughed, and with a push of his toes, his body turned with the ball. He moved left and right like a ghost. Lan Yiqing's kick missed, and Yang Fan had already flashed past her. Just as he was about to run, a figure flashed in front of him. A beautiful figure stood in front of him and sneered, "If you want to pass, you have to get through me first." The person who came was the female guard, Gao Ying. Yang Fan dribbled the ball and rushed left and right. He used 5 feints in a row, but none of them fooled her. Gao Ying's lower body was extremely stable. She followed him like a shadow, and always blocked in front of him. At this time, Lan Yiqing also jumped to grab the ball and formed a pincer attack. When Yang Fan saw this, he immediately shouted, "Catch!" Yang Fan kicked the ball, and the ball suddenly swept past Gao Ying's left shoulder and fell straight in front of Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga ran with all his strength, faster than a galloping horse. He rushed with all his strength to grab the landing point of the ball. When he was just a step away, a figure flew in the air and with a spin kick, the ball was kicked back before it landed at Lan Yiqing's feet. The person floated down, and 2 bright and heroic eyebrows raised provocatively at Chu Kuanga. It was Xie Xiaoman. Lan Yiqing took advantage of the fact that the monk team's 2 main players, Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga, were in her own half of the court. She rushed forward with the ball, passing Hong 1 and Hong 9 in a row, getting closer and closer to the goal. At this time, because she had passed 2 people in a row, she could not control the strength of the ball well. She used her foot, but she did not control the angle well, and the ball bounced forward 2 feet. Lan Yiqing was anxious, and just as she was about to jump to get the ball back, a big foot circled the ball at her feet. Lan Yiqing looked up angrily, and saw a person in front of her. Because her ball had been broken, his face was nervous and excited. It was Ma Qiao. "Pass the ball. Pass the ball. 18. Pass the ball." A few monks saw the opponent's General Gao Ying rushing out like an arrow, and was about to pounce on him, so they hurriedly shouted at Ma Qiao. Ma Qiao ignored them and smiled at the little beauty opposite him. "Hello, Miss Lan." The little girl's willowy eyebrows were raised, and she fiercely said, "Hello, my ass. Give me the ball." Oh, the beauty's coquettish voice was unique, and Ma Qiao's heart skipped a beat. Without thinking, he subconsciously kicked the ball, and the ball was at Miss Lan's feet. Aya! When the ball was kicked, only then did Ma Qiao realize that something was wrong. He wanted to snatch the ball back, but it was too late. Gao Ying was originally rushing towards Ma Qiao, but when she saw the ball at Lan Yiqing's feet, she immediately changed her direction and rushed towards the monk's goal. At this time, she used the lightness skill of 8 steps overtaking Cicada. Her figure rose and fell as if she was flying, and at the same time she shouted, "Shao Qing, pass the ball?" This was a rare opportunity, so how could she not take advantage of it? If it wasn't for this good opportunity, she wouldn't have used the lightness skill so easily. Martial arts could strengthen a person's physique, but it couldn't turn a person into a god. This kind of thing that relied on explosive force couldn't be used more than a few times, or else the arena would really become a paradise for martial arts experts. For example, a person could use explosive force to lift up a boulder that weighed 700 or 800 caddies, or even 1,000 caddies, and throw it more than 10 feet away. However, if you gave him a sword that weighed 3 caddies, and asked him to lift it for 4 hours, he wouldn't be able to do it. This lightness skill could also suddenly increase a person's speed in a short period of time. In that instant, it wasn't impossible to catch up to a galloping horse. However, if you asked him to run at this speed for an hour, he wouldn't be able to finish it even if you chopped his head off. Therefore, if it wasn't for the fact that this opportunity was hard to come by, Miss Gao Ying would also conserve her strength and not waste it easily. Lan Yiqing didn't expect this idiot to be so slow-witted. The ball passed to her feet, and she was stunned for a moment. Then, she heard Gao Ying's shout and she came to her senses. She hurriedly dribbled the ball past Ma Qiao. Hong Yi and the others rushed over angrily, but before they could form an encirclement, Lan Yiqing had already passed the ball to Gao Ying. Chapter 115. Gao Ying's figure paused for a moment, then she volleyed the ball into the net and into the eye of the wind. Thunderous cheers immediately broke out on and off the field. The inner palace team had taken the lead. Hongyi was so angry that his mouth and eyes were crooked. He glared at Ma Qiao and said, "Which side are you on? Why did you pass the ball to that little girl?" Ma Qiao had just passed the ball to her unconsciously when the little beauty glared at him. At this moment, he was filled with regret and couldn't say anything. Hong Lu rushed over and scolded, "You bastard, add 3 more levels and beat him up." A group of big monks swarmed over and held Ma Qiao down, punching and kicking him. Ma Qiao hugged his head and squatted on the ground, crying out, "Isn't it just a ball? What's so great about giving it to her?" Hongyi was also furious when he heard this. He immediately rolled up his sleeves and joined in the fight. When the palace maids and guards saw this, they all covered their mouths and laughed. On the sidelines, Princess Taiping couldn't help but smile when she saw this scene. She said to Shanghai Wan'er, "Shui Huai is used to making trouble. Now he wants to participate in the Upper Yuan Kuju competition. Does he really think he can do it with this group of people?" She couldn't help but shake her head as she said this. Shanghai Wan'er said, "Ling Yue, they may not all be masters, but there are many masters among them. Look at that burly man. Even though his Kuju skills are slightly inferior to yours and mine, they are not far off. As for the other one..." Shanghai Wan'er's gaze was fixed on Yang Fan. She said softly, "I'm afraid that little monk is a bit more brilliant than you and me." Originally, Princess Taiping was in a bad mood and did not pay much attention to the process of the game until Ma Qiao voluntarily gave up the ball and was beaten by his own team members, which aroused her attention. At this time, hearing the words of Shanghai Wan'er, she followed her gaze and her eyes fell on Yang Fan. Yang Fan had shaved his head and was wearing a monk's robe. His appearance was very different from that day when he was wearing embroidered clothes and a small hat, but his facial features were the same. Shanghai Wan'er was the first to notice his superb skills, but she did not recognize that this monk was the man wearing embroidered clothes and a small hat that day. But Princess Taiping was different. Because Yang Fan's temperament and charm had left a deep impression on her, she only needed a glance to recognize this person. It was him. Why did he become a monk? Princess Taiping cried out in surprise. Shanghai Wan'er looked at her in surprise and asked, "What's wrong?" Princess Taiping shook her head and stared at Yang Fan without blinking. Shanghai Wan'er felt a bit strange. She could not help but look at Yang Fan a few times. Vaguely, she also felt that he looked familiar. The game continued. Princess Taiping was no longer casually watching the game like before. She watched very seriously. After watching for a long time, she could not help but say to Shanghai Wan'er, "His Kuju skill is indeed better than you and me." Shanghai Wan'er said, "What do you think? How is he compared to Xiaoman?" Princess Taiping looked seriously for a while and slowly said, "Now, he is on par with Xiaoman. If he really participates in the Lantern Festival, his skill will be better than Xiaoman's." Shanghai Wan'er frowned and said, "How can it be? After practicing Kuju to this level, it is as difficult as ascending to heaven to go further. How can you be sure that he can surpass Xiaoman in such a short time?" Princess Taiping smiled and said, "It's very simple. Because this person is not familiar with Kuju, he has not fully displayed his strength." Shanghai Wan'er was surprised and said, "Such a wonderful polo skill, you actually said that he does not know Kuju?" Princess Taiping did not answer her question. She slightly frowned and doubtfully said, "Strange, his polo skill is superb, but he does not know how to ride a horse. The ball under his feet seems to be alive, but he does not seem to be very proficient in Kuju. So where did he practice his polo skill? This person is really interesting." The Kuju game was over. The palace maids and female guards scored 7 goals. The monks of White Horse Temple were tired like grandchildren, but they only lost 1 goal and got 6 points. Of course, this was just an ordinary contest, only 1 round of the game. Looking at the appearance of the monks, if they played another round, most people would not be able to run at all. In addition, the inner palace team didn't send out all their masters. Princess Taiping and Shangguan Wan didn't participate, so Xiemuan was the #1 master of the inner palace team. She used the strategy of using a mediocre force against a superior force. She let Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing keep a close eye on Yang Fan while she fought against Chu Kuanga. Out of 7 goals, she scored 5. In this game, Yang Fan met a real master. His skills and Kuju skills became more and more proficient and flexible. In the end, Gao Ying and Lan Yiqing could not stop him at all. Yang Fan scored 1 goal after another, and the score was close to that of Xie Xiaoman. Although there were not many opportunities for the two to formally confront each other, the whole field actually became a contest between the two of them. In the end, Xiemuan had no choice but to personally deal with him. Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, and a few others who were good at Kuju scored another goal when the opponent's main force was pinned down by Yang Fan. In the end, they lost by only 1 goal. The palace maids felt that they did not surpass the White Horse Temple team by a large margin, so they were very dissatisfied. Originally, they still had many first-class Kuju masters who had not entered the field, such as Princess Taiping and Shangguan Daizhao. Otherwise, they believed that they could at least surpass this group of bald donkeys by 10 goals. But the monks of White Horse Temple were also very dissatisfied. They only lost by 1 goal. If Ma Qiao did not lose his mind and took the initiative to give the ball to the pouting little beauty, wouldn't it be a draw? Therefore, as soon as the game ended, the palace maids jumped in joy, and the eunuchs also shouted and cheered at the top of their lungs. All the participating monks and the spectating monks swarmed Ma Qiao, and punched and kicked him again. Poor Ma Qiao, in order to atone for his sins, ran around like a donkey. He ran until he was out of breath, and did not even have the strength to escape. Fortunately, although these ruffians did not know how to control their strength, they still knew to be merciful to their own people. In addition, they knew that Ma Qiao had a good relationship with the chief monk, so they did not hit him too hard. Yang Fan saw that they did not hit him too hard, so he did not pay attention to them. Ma Qiao was a glutton who could not move when he saw a beautiful woman. Previously, he almost lost his life because of women. Now, he still did not repent. He was so muddle-headed during the game. It was time for him to be taught a lesson. Although the game was over, Princess Taiping still stared at Yang Fan. She saw Yang Fan walk leisurely to the side of the field, talking and laughing with the tattooed, strong man next to him. He lifted his clothes to wipe the sweat on his forehead. When he smiled, he revealed a mouthful of white teeth. Princess Taiping was in a trance. Suddenly, the figure of another handsome man appeared in her mind, and quietly overlapped with the Yang Fan in front of her. That man, at that time, was also so young. He wore a set of arrow sleeves that was similar to Yang Fan's martial clothes. He laughed heartily, picked up his clothes to wipe the sweat, and walked in front of the stands with a few friends, talking and laughing. His face was full of sunshine, and his smile was so bright. Compared to many youths who secretly glanced at the emperor and empress on the stage and deliberately made a mighty posture, his steps seemed so calm, so casual, but in the casual, there was a sense of freedom and elegance. At that time, Father Emperor's headache came back, and he was in a dull pain. He held his head and used his index finger to gently rub the space between his eyebrows. Mother Empress was sweeping her eyes over all the noble sons who had just finished their game. That day, Mother Empress specially held a Kuju competition to find a good husband for her. She was still very young, very lively, very straightforward, and very bold. When she saw his smile, the young girl's heart went into a trance, as if the sun in the sky dazzled her eyes. She almost didn't think, and reached out her hand, pointing at the youth who leisurely walked in front of the stage. Her heart was beating wildly in her chest like a fawn, and her voice trembled with shyness. But her voice was so loud that when she spoke, she startled herself. "That's him," she cried. "It's him," she cried. "Anyang." daughter wants him to be my son-in-law." This shout, like the morning bell on the gate of heaven, suddenly spread out from the stage, rippling in the top of her heart, making it tremble. A layer of tears floated in Princess Taiping's eyes. She blinked her eyes, blinked away the mist in her eyes, and said in a low voice, "Call that youth for me." Her slender jade finger pointed at Yang Fan, who had just taken the kasaya from someone's hand, and was talking and laughing with others while putting on the kasaya. Shanghai Wan was slightly surprised and glanced at her. Her eyes glittered, but she didn't say anything. Yang Fan was led to Princess Taiping by a palace maid. Princess Taiping didn't just sit there and wait for him to come. She had already walked out of the screen before Yang Fan, and stood at the edge of the competition ground. That kind of hesitant and urgent look was like a young girl meeting her lover for the first time. Shanghai Wan was even more surprised at her forgetfulness. Yang Fan knew that if Princess Taiping saw him, she might have some doubts, and even call him in front of her to ask clearly, but he was not worried in his heart. Although Princess Taiping was the princess of the princesses, and the most favored woman by the empress in the Tang dynasty, he had never heard that she had any domineering behavior. Moreover, Xue Huai was the most favored man in the Tang dynasty. Based on Xue Huai's character of being protective, if this princess really wanted to find trouble with him, Xue Huai could also help her. Therefore, Yang Fan was very calm in his heart. He walked in front of Princess Taiping, calmly bowed, and respectfully said, "Little monk Hong Shichi greets the princess." After saying that, Yang Fan quickly glanced at Shanghai Wan and deeply engraved her appearance in his heart. Shanghai Wan was looking at him curiously. Being looked at by him, her heart unexpectedly trembled. That kind of look seemed to be just a casual glance, but Shanghai Wan felt completely different. Being looked at by him, Shanghai Wan actually felt like a little white rabbit being stared at by a big bad wolf. It was very dangerous and very scary. She was Shangguan Daizhao, the first person under the empress. When had she ever been afraid of anyone? Shanghai Wan thought that it was just a psychological effect, and was a little annoyed that she was a little afraid of a little monk's look. So she straightened her chest and bravely looked back. But Yang Fan had already stopped looking at her, so her counterattack fell on the air. Chapter 116. Hong Shichi. Princess Taiping stared at Yang Fan for a while and said slowly, "I've seen you before, right?" Yang Fan smiled calmly and said, "Yes. I had the honor to meet you by the Luo River." Princess Taiping's eyes flashed and said, "You weren't a monk at that time." Yang Fan touched his bald head and said with a wry smile, "Princess is still a princess, but the shopkeeper has become a monk. The affairs of the world are hard to predict. Back then, I never thought that this day would come." Princess Taiping glanced at his clothes and asked, "What's your position in the White Horse Temple?" Yang Fan put his hands together and said seriously, "I'm the head monk in the White Horse Temple." Princess Taiping raised her eyebrows and said, "I didn't expect you to become a monk quickly and get promoted even faster. Others might not have the chance to become the head monk of a temple even if they read scriptures and hit wooden fish for a lifetime. But you, in the blink of an eye, became the head monk of the largest temple in Luoyang?" Yang Fan smiled shyly and said, "Princess, you don't know. It was Master Xue's idea to become a monk and be promoted to the head monk. I think you also know that Master Xue is used to creating miracles, just like the Ming Tang and Heaven in Front." Princess Taiping snorted and pondered over the meaning of Yang Fan's words. She was slightly moved and said, "Could it be? Xue Huai forced you to become a monk?" Her guess was half right, but Yang Fan said seriously, "Princess, you are wrong. When I was a layman, I met with some trouble. Fortunately, I was enlightened by Master Xue and sought shelter from Buddhism. Only then was I able to save my life. I am very grateful to Master Xue." When Yang Fan said this, he suddenly saw Xue Huai walking lightly from the back of the palace. Hong Yi's disciple went up and said something to him. Xue Huai hurried over and was standing behind a group of palace maids, listening to their conversation. Yang Fan saw his movement from the corner of his eye. He pretended not to know, but his words were extremely respectful and loyal. Princess Taiping revealed a faint smile on her face and said, "Is it better to be a monk than an ordinary person? Since you became a monk just to avoid calamity, and not because you have a heart for Buddhism, then not to mention being a chief monk, even if you were to become an abbot, I'm afraid you would be unwilling, right? That day I had the intention to recruit you, but you refused. Today, there's no harm in me saying it again. If you're willing to become my disciple, I'll help you deal with whatever troubles you have. What do you think? Working in my residence might not be as awe-inspiring as the White Horse Temple's first seat, but at your age, I'm afraid you might not like it." As soon as Xue Huai came out of the back of the palace, Hong Yi and the others rushed to him to show off their bravery and brilliance. They said that if it wasn't for Ma Qiao's lust, with their months of hard work, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Tang Dynasty's #1 martial arts team. Xue Huai was overjoyed to hear this. Now, as soon as he arrived at the side of the arena, he heard that Princess Taiping was trying to poach his disciple. Princess Taiping wanted to poach the #1 main force of the White Horse Temple. It was really intolerable. He suppressed his anger and wanted to see how Yang Fan would answer. Yang Fan had already seen him standing at the back of the crowd. This Xue Huai was like a donkey. If he angered him, he would not dare to do anything to Princess Taiping, but if he killed him in front of everybody, it would be a piece of cake. Yang Fan looked at his nose, looked at his heart, and replied in all seriousness, "Ba, Your Highness, your words are wrong. I was able to escape from disaster because of Master Xue's kindness. I was also recognized by Master Xue, who put me in an important position. As the saying goes, a scholar will die for his bosom friend. How can I find another master?" Xue Huai was very happy to hear this. Princess Taiping didn't know that he had arrived and was still a little reluctant. In her opinion, recruiting Yang Fan was only because she cherished his talent. This Yang Fan, whether it was kuju or bow striking, was a promising talent. If he could enter Princess Taiping's residence, it would be of great help to her. She liked sports since she was a child and loved kuju and bow striking. If it wasn't for this, her parents wouldn't have deliberately held a kuju competition to choose a husband for her. Later, because her husband Xue Xiao also loved kuju and bow striking, the couple complemented each other. They even set up a kuju team and bow striking team in their residence, and became superfans. Unfortunately, she was obsessed with kuju and bow striking. But every year during the Lantern Festival, the palace held a competition. She didn't win either of these two. On the contrary, sumo wrestling, which she didn't like, always won first place. Today, after seeing Yang Fan, Princess Taiping really cherished his talent. Otherwise, with her proud and arrogant personality, why would she condescend to recruit him again and again? Of course, she saw that Yang Fan looked like her deceased husband. Maybe it was because of empathy, but she didn't realize this subconscious effect. After hearing Yang Fan's words, Princess Taiping sneered and said mockingly, "Look at you. Do you really want to be a monk for the rest of your life? I don't know if you have any brothers in your family. If not, when you become a monk, your family line will end. Is it because repaying a favor that you are unfilial? If you are really devoted to Buddhism—" The corner of Princess Taiping's mouth curled up slightly. She said mockingly, "I don't believe it at all. Don't think that after entering my residence, you will only be a kuju player for the rest of your life. If you really have the ability, I will recommend you to be an official. There are also a lot of people who have been recommended by me to be an official." Although Princess Taiping was the most beloved daughter of Wu Zetian, she rarely involved herself in political affairs. Until the end of Empress Wu's reign, she was very clever. She never appeared to be interested in politics in front of her mother. In fact, until Xue Xiao's death, she was a little woman immersed in love and happiness. She never thought of participating in political affairs. However, not participating in political affairs did not mean that she was completely isolated. Princess Taiping's pair of discerning eyes completely inherited her mother's characteristic. She was very knowledgeable and had recommended many talented people to the imperial court. After these people were put in an important position by the imperial court, they indeed showed their extraordinary talents. Afterwards, because she was interested in politics, she recommended more and more talented people. Because of this, there were some scandals. The rumors in the streets said that the people she recommended were all her gigolos. Just like how Shanghai Wan presided over the Zhaowen Guan and evaluated the world's poetry, many of the world's poets gathered under her. As a result, there were many different opinions among the people, saying that many of these people were her gigolos. Working as a woman, the more men she came into contact with, all kinds of unbearable rumors naturally came one after another. This kind of atmosphere was still the same in modern times. As long as a young and beautiful woman was put in an important position, or became a secretary, even if you were innocent, you would still be looked at with colored glasses. At this time, Xue Huaiyi's thoughts went astray. In his view, this coquettish young widow most likely took a fancy to Yang Fan's handsomeness. This princess was incomparably beautiful, even he often had thoughts of her. At this time, he was afraid that Yang Fan would not be able to resist the temptation of Princess Taiping's beauty. Once he agreed, even if he did not nod his head, Princess Taiping might not have the ability to snatch him away from his hands. As a result, Xue Huai let out a long laugh, walked out from the crowd, and loudly said, "Everyone in the world knows that the princess loves talents. The talents recommended by the princess are all put in an important position by the imperial court. This is not false. However, I already have the heart to plan for 17's future. There is no need to trouble your highness with this matter." Princess Taiping did not expect Xue Huai to arrive at this time, and could not help but be surprised. She was startled for a moment, then smiled and said, "Teacher Xue is here. Although the head of your temple is skilled, it is a pity that your other disciples are not promising talent. With just him alone, it will be difficult for Teacher Xue to show his skills during the Lantern Festival. In my residence, there are many experts in Kuju and Koju. If I can get your disciples' help, I may not be unable to take first place." Xue Huai sneered and said, "This, your highness does not need to worry about. My White Horse Temple did not have the fate to participate in the Lantern Festival in the past. If I can rank in the top 3 this time, I will be satisfied. Speaking of which, I and your highness are rivals. How is it possible for me to give away my Kuju expert?" Princess Taiping smiled lightly and said, "Since Teacher Xue cherishes talents so much, it is not appropriate for me to take away your beloved disciple. Wan'er, let's go." Princess Taiping finished speaking, flicked her sleeves and left. Xue Huai was seething with anger as he loudly said, "Princess was wrong just now. Not only do I want to fight for the title of Kuju and Jiju, I also want to fight for the title of sumo wrestling, which has always been dominated by your Taiping princess residence. This is a one-on-one competition. I will rely on my disciple Hong Shiqi." Princess Taiping paused and slowly turned around. The sullen expression on her face had disappeared and was replaced with a faint smile. She said, "I did not know that this disciple of Teacher Xue is an all-rounder. Good. Very good, then during the Lantern Festival, I want to see Teacher Xue's skills." Princess Taiping raised her eyebrows and reached out to hold Wan Er's arm. She said in a deep voice, "At that time, I will also participate with Wan Er. I want to see the real martial arts of your disciple." Xue Huai laughed and said, "Wonderful. I want you to participate. If not, how can I show the prestige of my White Horse Temple?" Princess Taiping heard Xue Huai's presumptuous words and was extremely angry. But she really did not dare to contradict Xue Huai. Even though she was the most favored princess, she was still quite afraid of Xue Huai. The royal family did not have family ties. It was not only because of the power struggle and deception. Even in the era of Qingping, where the position of crown prince was determined at birth, the relationship between the imperial sons and daughters was very cold, and the relationship between them and their parents was the same. Why? Because the environment they grew up in was different. Whether a family was close or not, it was not based on blood. Kinship and friendship were the same, they were both nurtured together. In the royal family, whether it was brothers, sisters, father and son, mother and daughter, they did not spend much time together. The royal children had their own palace, and each had a group of eunuchs and nannies to take care of them. Brothers and sisters did not have many opportunities to spend time with each other. Even when they greeted their father and mother, they only greeted them out of courtesy. Naturally, the family ties between them were very indifferent. Princess Taiping could not guarantee that she, as a biological daughter, was more important in her mother's heart than Feng Xiaobao, who was her mother's favorite. This brat does not know how to appreciate favors. He made me be humiliated in front of everyone. For a moment, Princess Taiping hated Yang Fan. Chapter 117. Xue Huai saw Princess Taiping and Shanghai Wanner leave and snorted heavily. He turned to look at Yang Fan and smiled. He had heard everything Yang Fan had said. Xue Huai was a common man in the marketplace and was very particular about loyalty. Yang Fan's loyal reply was especially to his taste. Xue Huai patted Yang Fan's shoulder and said loudly, "Don't listen to that foxy woman's coaxing. You just need to do your job well. In the future, I will give you a great future." There were many palace maids and eunuchs present. Xue Huai openly accused Princess Taiping of being a foxy woman. He was not afraid that his words would reach Princess Taiping's ears. In fact, in Xue Huai's heart, Princess Taiping was indeed a foxy woman. Every time he saw her, he could not help but feel restless. If this kind of monster was not a foxy woman, then what was she? After Princess Taiping and Shanghai Wanner left, they could not continue the competition. With the current physical condition of the monks of White Horse Temple, they could not continue the competition even if they wanted to. All the monks put on their robes and prepared to leave the palace. As Xue Huai led the group of monks out, he asked about the situation of the competition just now. Although Yang Fan was also annoyed that Ma Qiao had failed to live up to his expectations, if he allowed these monks to add oil to the fire and infuriate Xue Huai, Ma Qiao would inevitably suffer again. Yang Fan hurriedly came over and said a few words before changing the topic. He grinned and said, "Abbot, if we can show our faces in the upper prime tournament, what is the abbot prepared to reward the disciples?" This sentence was also what all the disciples wanted to know. Those who originally wanted to report Ma Qiao immediately shut their mouths and pricked up their ears to listen to Xue Huai. Xue Huai waved his hand and said, "If you can fight for the prestige of our White Horse Temple, each of you will be rewarded with 100,000 coins." All the monks heard this and immediately cheered. Xue Huai glanced at Yang Fan and said, "As for you, White Horse Temple is qualified to enter the palace and compete because of you. I've said before that I'll give you a great future. What do you want?" Yang Fan said, "This disciple wants to join the army like 19th junior brother." Xue Huai was slightly startled. He was not lying when he said that he wanted to give Yang Fan a bright future. However, his original idea was to arrange for Yang Fan to be the master of a temple under the jurisdiction of the White Horse Temple. Or, he could turn him into a layman disciple of the White Horse Temple. Then, he could use his great general title to request for him to be a nominal general. All in all, he did not want Yang Fan to leave his side. The Lantern Festival was held every year. After next year, there would be another one. Once Yang Fan left, where could he find another outstanding person to lead the White Horse Temple in the competition? Xue Huai was a little displeased. "What? 17, do you really want to leave me?" Yang Fan quickly moved closer and whispered, "Abbot, if it weren't for you, this disciple and 18 would have fled to the ends of the earth. How could this disciple forget your kindness? If you say that this disciple is only interested in profit, I should also understand that I can only rely on you to enjoy the shade. Don't you think so? Shui Huai's expression softened a little. Then why did you? Yang Fan revealed a slightly bitter expression. Abbot, this disciple just doesn't want to be a monk. In fact, no matter where I go, won't I still be your disciple? Moreover, if I enter the imperial army and make a name for myself, it won't do you any harm. Think about it, you have the Empress's trust. Although no one dares to disobey you, you can't always trouble the Empress for everything, right? If Abbot has his own strength in all aspects, especially in the army, then Abbot, you are like a big tree with deep root. No matter how the wind blows in all directions, no matter how hard it blows, Abbot will not be shaken in the slightest. The Empress is old after all. Shui Huai was enlightened. He slowly nodded and said, yes, that makes sense. Good, since you have this intention, I will send you and Yashuang to the Imperial Army after this year's upper prime. Yang Fan hurriedly thanked him. Thank you, Abbot. When Yang Fan learned that Chu Tiange's biggest wish was to return to the Imperial Army, and this request was also agreed by Shui Huai, he had the idea of joining the Imperial Army. However, he never found a chance to ask. Now that Shui Huai and Princess Taiping had separated, it unexpectedly helped him. Thinking back to the time when he had infiltrated the White Horse Temple while being hunted by the entire city, he had originally wanted to resolve the situation in front of him. He had not expected that through Shui Huai, not only would he be able to see the Great Tang's hidden Prime Minister Shangguan Wan in the Imperial Palace, but he would also have a chance to get close to Qiushenji. This monk Shui was really his lucky star. Although the White Horse Temple disciples were only defeated by one goal in a contest with the Imperial Kuju Master, they were very excited for a while. But after this battle, they still saw their shortcomings, even if they didn't admit it. Since then, they trained even harder. Originally, Yang Fan was worried that these ruffians couldn't bear hardships, but he didn't expect that once their fighting spirit was aroused, they would be able to bear hardships far better than ordinary people. It should be known that these ruffians became ruffians because their families were poor and they had no food or clothing to rely on. They had also suffered a lot in the past. Although they had become ruffians now, they still had the strength to bear hardships, but it was covered by their slippery appearance. Now that they had the fighting spirit and Shui Huai's reward, how could they not go all out? After 2 days, they went to the palace again and competed with the Imperial Kuju team again. After coming back, they continued to work hard to improve their skills. Yang Fan was the main force of the team every time. He had fought with Xie Xiaoman from the Imperial Kuju team more than once. Both of them had a deep impression of each other. Every time they met, they would fight like roosters, wanting to suppress each other. Qiushenji had already sent a message that the Kuju masters selected from the Imperial Guards would be assembled tomorrow. At that time, they would rush over and compete with the White Horse Temple disciples. So today, Yang Fan didn't give them too many training tasks. He simply moved their bodies, so as not to consume too much of their physical strength. Ma Qiao had been sitting on the bench these days. Of course, he didn't participate in the competition. In all the daily activities of the White Horse Temple, he was naturally excluded. Imagine if you were in a group, but everyone treated you like air. No one would sit with you when you were eating. What would it feel like? It wasn't easy to integrate into a circle, but it was easy to be excluded and isolated by a circle. One mistake was enough to get you beaten up by everyone. From a small family and a workshop to a large city and a country, it was the same. Ma Qiao sat alone under the shade of the locust tree. His chin rested on his knees. He looked at his companions on the court with a lonely face. That's it. Brother Chu, you should go back and rest. Tomorrow, it doesn't matter if we win or lose the game against the Imperial Guards. The key is to familiarize yourself with their playing style and learn their strength. Only by competing with such a strong team can we improve ourselves. Well, okay. You should also rest early. Don't practice horsemanship tonight. Chu Kuanga wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he just nodded and said what Yang Fan wanted him to say. He then turned around and walked to the meditation room. Chu Kuanga was naturally confident in his riding skills. After this period of hard training, Yang Fan's horsemanship had also improved by leaps and bounds. Coupled with his superb horsemanship skills, it was enough to make up for his inferior horsemanship compared to the top experts. Chu Kuanga believed that if there were 2 or 3 experts like him and Yang Fan in their team, they would be able to compete with the Imperial Guard. However, such experts could only be found by chance. It was very difficult to win the intense polo game with just the 2 of them as the main force. Chu Kuanga was not confident in this. Moreover, this matter was related to whether he could return to the Imperial Guards, so he was under great psychological pressure. However, even if he told Yang Fan about this, Yang Fan could do nothing about it. It would only add to his worries, so it was better not to say it. In fact, Yang Fan was also aware of Chu Kuanga's psychological pressure. To Xuehuai, this game was just a matter of face. To the ruffians, it was just 100,000 yuan of wealth. To him and Chu Tiange, it was actually of great significance. However, he also felt that there was no need to say this out loud. Therefore, he only silently looked at Chu Kuanga's heavy footsteps and did not say anything. Seeing that Yang Fan was idle, Ma Qiao unconsciously straightened his body, as if he was afraid that Yang Fan would not see him. Due to the cold shoulder from everyone these days, he had been so embarrassed that he was depressed and did not dare to speak. He was even a little afraid to come into contact with Yang Fan. However, among everyone, he was the most friendly with Yang Fan. At this time, he was even more eager to get close to Yang Fan. "Brother Qiao, come with me." As expected, Yang Fan walked over, but he only said one sentence before walking towards the backyard. Ma Qiao hurriedly got up, patted the dust off his butt and followed behind him. In the late autumn dusk, the pagoda forest was very quiet. First-level pagoda, third-level pagoda, fifth-level pagoda, and seventh-level pagoda, from 1 to 7, they were built for the dead monks according to their status. It was as if pagoda after pagoda stood there quietly, forming a quiet forest of pagodas. Yang Fan walked slowly through the pagoda forest. After walking for a while, he sat down on a 7-story pagoda pedestal covered in moss. He turned his head to look at Ma Qiao and patted the stone pedestal beside him. Ma Qiao understood and walked over, carefully sitting down next to him. Yang Fan raised his face and looked at the dusky sky. After a while, he suddenly asked, "Brother Qiao, what do you think people live for?" Ma Qiao was perturbed and did not know what topic to use to break this cold situation. Suddenly hearing him say this, he could not help but laugh. "No way, Xiao Fan, you have only been a monk for a few days and you are already learning from those old monks. Don't tell me you still want to be a real monk?" Yang Fan stared at him seriously and said word by word, "This is not a trick. I just want to know, what do you live for?" Ma Qiao was at a loss. After thinking carefully for a while, he mumbled, "Live. My parents gave birth to me, of course I have to live. If I live, then live well, be filial to my parents, marry a wife and have children, continue the family line. It should be like this. Otherwise, what else do you think I live for?" Chapter 118. Yang Fan calmly sat there. After a long time, he slowly said, "When I was a child, I lived in a small mountain village, carefree and without worries. I never thought about how big the world outside the mountain village was. Had it not been for the murder which followed, I think I should have grown up in peace there, married a mountain girl, and might have had children of my own by now. Many years later, my descendants would bury me in a graveyard among the weeds on the hillside facing the sun. Every year on the Qingming festival, they would come to my grave and put a few fresh fruits on it. On the Chongyang festival, they would come to my grave and burn a stack of paper money for me. From birth to death, I would stay there. Other than Xiaozhou, I would never go to any other place, and I would never get to know other people. Perhaps this kind of life would be very boring in other people's eyes, but people live, sooner or later they will die, sooner or later they will turn into the earth. It doesn't matter if you are an emperor, a general or a commoner, it's all the same. Whether the grave is magnificent or not, it's other people who see it. What does it have to do with you? The tranquility of a small village is not necessarily a kind of happiness. Ma Qiao didn't know why he suddenly said these things. He looked at him with a puzzled expression. Yang Fan continued, "But the heavens don't follow my wishes. My village was destroyed, my relatives all died. I had no choice but to leave and look for a new life. At the same time, I have to bear the injustice of my relatives, the debt of my relatives. But this is only my responsibility, it's not the whole of my future life. When I finish all this, I will have to find my own path and start my own life. Do you know what I plan to do?" Ma Qiao couldn't help but ask, "What do you plan to do?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "I plan to, after I clear my debt, I will first find my Nyonyo," Ma Qiao said. "In terms of age, she has already grown up. She is working as a maid in some rich and powerful family. In another 2 years, maybe she will be betrothed to some steward or a capable servant. The sea of people is boundless, where will you find her? She saved you, but you saved her as well. You don't have to take so much responsibility for yourself." Yang Fan said seriously, "I don't know if she's my responsibility. But she is my concern." "Worries?" "Yes. Worry. Although we are not related by blood, we are closer than biological siblings. If I can't find her and confirm whether she's alive or not, I won't be at ease, so I have to find her. If she's already married and her man treats her well, I can leave without worry and live my own life. If she hasn't married yet and her master doesn't treat her well, if she's willing to come with me, then I'll take her away and treat her as my own sister. I'll be responsible for finding her a satisfactory husband, preparing her dowry, and marrying her off in style. What about you? What are your plans?" "Maybe I'll go back to Nanyang. My master is now the ruler of a country, and my senior is the young master. I can live well there. Of course, if I meet a girl and fall in love with her, and she likes to live in the Tang dynasty, I'll also stay with her. No matter where, as long as I have land and a house, I have my own things to do, and I can let my wife and children live a stable life. It's very simple, isn't it?" Yang Fan looked at Ma Qiao with a smile and said, "Every man has to marry and have children when he grows up. He has to have his own family and produce his own descendant. Nobles, gentry, merchants, peddlers, all of them are born as humans, born as adults, married and had children, and turned to dust. The same path, there's no difference. Even if you have the whole world, the path you've taken is no different from living in a small mountain village like I said. The whole world is just a slightly bigger village. However, if you have the chance to become a nobleman, then there's no harm in fighting for it. Because this way your hut will be more spacious, your courtyard will be bigger, and your fence will be stronger. You can sleep more soundly at night, and you won't have to worry about weasels sneaking into your fence to steal chickens." Yang Fan smiled and said, "If you don't have the ability to become a nobleman, then take a step back and become a nobleman, a gentry, or a merchant. In short, no matter how much ability you have to fight for what you can get with your ability. Because this way your parents, wife, and children will live a better life." Yang Fan turned to Ma Qiao and sat face to face with him. He asked seriously, "I'm 17 this year and you're 19. You're 2 years older than me. It's time for you to be crowned. Have you ever thought about how you'll look after your mother in the future? How you'll marry a wife and have children? What kind of mountain village do you plan to give them? What kind of fenced courtyard?" Ma Qiao was stunned. Yang Fan stared at him and asked again, You've never thought about these things, right? Ma Qiao's face was a bit red and he was speechless. Yang Fan said, Auntie worked hard to do business to save money for you to marry a wife. Even though she didn't know how to do things, and lost money every time she did business, she at least knew what she wanted to do and why she wanted to do it. But what about you? Everyone praised you for being filial. You are filial, but have you ever thought about how you and your family will live a year from now? How you and your family will live 10 years from now? Have you ever thought about how your mother is already old? If she suddenly falls seriously ill, with the few copper coins in your pocket, how are you going to find a doctor to treat her? Have you ever thought about how you're going to arrange your life in the future? Ma Qiao's face was red to the ears, and he already felt a bit ashamed to show his face. Yang Fan was not polite at all and said in a mocking tone, You haven't. You're just living in a muddle. Every day you open your eyes, fill your stomach, and muddle-headedly deal with the errands in the workshop, and then you've muddled through the day. When you get home at night, you fill your stomach again, and then you sleep soundly. You've probably only considered what's going to happen 3 days from now, right? Ma Qiao's face was red to the ears. Yang Fan said, About the matter between you and Bao Yining, let's not talk about right or wrong for the time being. Later on, you bravely stepped forward and didn't let the innocent die for you. Not only did others praise you for being loyal and responsible, but you must also be very proud of yourself and think that you're a hero, right? I'm not going to criticize you about this matter. Even the smartest person can be muddled at times. But about the matter of football, what do you think? Back then, Chu Kuanga was kicked out of the Imperial Army. Returning to the Imperial Army was his biggest dream, and it was related to his life's fate. You tell me, is this just a matter of playing football? And for you, isn't this also an opportunity? Brother Chu wanted to use this matter to make a contribution and have the abbot help him return to the Imperial Army. Why didn't you think of it? Are you planning to go back to being a workshop attendant after things have calmed down, or are you planning to be a monk for the rest of your life? I think you've never thought about how you're going to live in the future. You still have an old mother at home waiting for you to take care of, and you still have dozens of years to live. Such a good opportunity is right in front of you, yet you're still muddle-headed and don't even think about it. Ma Qiao was scolded until his whole body heated up and he was drenched in sweat. Yang Fan said, I asked you just now, what is the point of living? There's no meaning to a person's life in itself. There's no difference between a pig, a dog, or a mosquito. What's important is what you give it, what you fight for it. This is the root of the spirit of all living things. It doesn't matter if you throw a goal to others. What I want to know is, when will you be able to find your own destiny? The sound of Yang Fan's footsteps became more and more distant, gradually disappearing into the pagoda forest. Ma Qiao sat there alone for a long time, not moving at all. The sky gradually darkened, but Ma Qiao was still sitting there, the same color as the stone pagoda that had stood for thousands of years. The next morning, when Yang Fan led a group of players to the court, he saw Ma Qiao seriously cleaning the court. The spacious court was almost completely cleaned, and no one knew when he woke up. The monks were very surprised, but they did not say anything. Yang Fan also did not say anything. Of course, he hoped to scold Ma Qiao to wake up. However, the same words may have the effect of a severe warning to some people, but to others it was just a 3-day enthusiasm. Whether Ma Qiao would really repent or not, they would have to wait and see. Today they still had to wait for the Imperial Guard's archery team to arrive, so they still did not do any intense exercise, mainly to warm up their bodies. A group of monks was practicing archery when suddenly the side door of the temple's backyard opened. Dozens of horses galloped in, and the monks who were practicing immediately stopped and looked at the group of people. The older ones were in their 30s, and the younger ones were not even 20. They were dressed in all kinds of short, archery sleeves, and rode tall horses of the same color. Although they were young, fat, thin, tall and short, and the colors of their clothes and horses were different. Their movements and mannerisms revealed a kind of dignified and solemn aura. If only one of them appeared on a horse, perhaps people would not be able to guess their identity, but with so many of them appearing at the same time, and their spirits were all the same, Yang Fan immediately understood that these people were the Imperial Guard's archery team that they had been looking forward to for a long time. Chu Kuanga reined in his horse and looked at the group of people. His body suddenly trembled, and he was a little absent-minded. Among those people, there were actually two faces that he was familiar with. Those people looked around disdainfully at the group of monks. Their expressions were originally quite disdainful, but they soon noticed Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga was tall, and among the group of monks, he was like a crane among a flock of chickens. It was difficult not to notice him. At a glance, two of those people were startled. The two of them looked at each other and whispered a few words, as if they wanted to confirm Chu Kuanga's identity. Then, they both knocked on their horses' bellies and welcomed him. The two of them rode to Chu Kuanga's side and looked him up and down. One of them said with some surprise, "Sir, is your surname Chu?" Chu Kuanga's face was a little red from excitement, and there were already faint tears in his eyes. Hearing the two of them ask, he could not help but laugh. "Li Da, Wei San, we haven't seen each other for a few years. Don't you recognize me, Chu Kuanga?" Chapter 119. Big Brother, it really is Big Brother Chu. The two burly men were surprised and overjoyed. They jumped off their horses, lifted their robes, and knelt in front of Chu Kuanga's horse. One of them, whose face was full of beard, burst into tears. "Big Brother! Little brother has finally found you. What are you doing? Quickly get up!" Chu Kuanga jumped off the horse and hurriedly went forward to support him. The two men, one on the left and one on the right, hugged him tightly. The bearded man hurriedly asked, "Big Brother, where have you been these past few years? I've been looking for you everywhere, I missed you so much." The other man also had tears in his eyes as he choked with sobs. "Big Brother Chu, you made me miss you so much." The three of them hugged each other, revealing their true feelings. This attracted a lot of surprised gazes, but no one came forward to ask. Yang Fan also didn't pay attention to this reunion scene. He was looking at a middle-aged man who was surrounded by a group of people. This person was also wearing a set of arrow sleeve. He was already over 100 years old, and his hair was slightly gray. His stature wasn't tall, but he was extremely sturdy. As he sat on the horse, he was as steady as a mountain. His eyebrows were thick and messy, growing like weed. One look and one could tell that he was giving off a chilling, killing intent. Yang Fan recognized him. He was Qiu Shenji. That night, although Yang Fan only took a glance at him before running away, the appearance of this great enemy had already been deeply imprinted in Yang Fan's mind. Yang Fan didn't expect that he would personally come with a team. Yang Fan's eyes faintly revealed a murderous intent, but when his eyes moved away from Qiu Shenji's ferocious eyebrows and fell on the saber at Qiu Shenji's waist, the murderous intent faded a little. He then noticed that the people around Qiu Shenji were all tall and sturdy, full of vigor. He was afraid that they were not ordinary people, so he became even more vigilant. Qiu Shenji seemed to have sensed that someone was looking at him. His eyes suddenly shot over like lightning and accurately fixed on Yang Fan. Yang Fan's heart shivered. He instantly withdrew his scrutinizing and hateful eyes and replaced them with curiosity and respect. Seeing Qiu Shenji looking at him, Yang Fan shyly smiled at him and dismounted from his horse. He walked in front of Chu Kuanga and said with a smile, "Big Brother Chu, are these two brothers your old acquaintances?" Chu Kuanga was chatting with the two of them, looking extremely intimate. When he saw Yang Fan walking over, he quickly pulled him in front of him and introduced him to the two of them. Come, let me introduce you. This is the head of the White Horse Temple, Hong Shichi." Yang Fan forced a smile and said, "Brother Chu, you're making fun of me again." Chu Kuanga laughed and said, "This is my little brother Yang Fan, you can call him Beta Persei." Erlang, this is my good friend and brother in the army. You can call him third brother Wei. Seeing that Chu Kuanga was very intimate with Yang Fan, Wei Yong hurriedly cupped his hands and said to him, I am Wei Yong, the commander of the left Yulin Guards. The left and right Yulin Guards of the Tang dynasty was the head of the Northern Imperial Army. At that time, the Imperial Army guarding the capital and the palace was divided into the Southern Imperial Army and the Northern Imperial Army. The Northern Imperial Army was directly controlled and mobilized by the Emperor. Now it was under the direct control of the Empress, while the Southern Imperial Army was under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War. In terms of nature, the Northern Imperial Army was the Emperor's private army, while the Southern Imperial Army was the national army. Therefore, the Northern Imperial Army was closer to the Emperor. Yang Fan did not expect that there would be a middle-level officer of the Northern Imperial Army among the anti-Jew members sent by the Imperial Army. Looking at this man's thin cheeks, high cheekbones, towering eyebrows and eyes, he looked a little primitive, with a light beard under his chin, full of heroic spirit, and his eyes were like lightning. Yang Fan hurriedly returned a salute to him and said affectionately, I am Yang Fan. Nice to meet you, third brother Wei. Chu Kuanga then pulled the man with a slightly high forehead, a full beard, and a face squeezed in the beard, like a big baboon that had not fully evolved, and introduced him to Yang Fan. This is Li Dayan, also my good brother. You can call him brotherly. Yang Fan cupped his hands to the man and said with a smile, Brotherly! I dare not. In front of Brother Chu, I dare not call you brother. I am just a few years older than you. You can call me second brotherly. Li Dayan hurriedly returned the salute, and said to Chu Kuanga with a face full of shame, It was all because of me that you were harmed. In the past few years, I couldn't find your whereabouts everywhere, and my heart is really... Chu Kuanga waved his hand and said, Don't mention those old sesame seeds and grains. Are you still addicted to alcohol all these years? Li Dayan said solemnly, Since I caused you to be demoted from the army, I have never touched a drop of alcohol. Chu Kuanga said happily, Good. If you can repent, you are still my good brother. While the two were talking, Xue Huai had already received the report from the reception monk. He strode out of the meditation room and laughed loudly. Old Qiu, you are finally here. Qiu Shenji saw Xue Huai and was also full of smiles. He hurriedly dismounted and threw the horsewhip to a guard. He strode forward and cupped his fists. Master Xue, long time no see. When Master Xue went to the north to attack the Turks, Gu Gulu fled at the sight of the wind and did not dare to fight. It really showed the power of the Tang dynasty. It is a pity that I cannot celebrate with you due to military duties. I hope you do not blame me. Xue Huai smiled. It's fine, I hate those boring social engagements the most. It is good that you are here today, you can drink with me. Come, please come in. Qiu Shenji turned around and ordered the others, Dismount and rest for a while. Everyone dismounted and the reception monk led them into the meditation room. Li Dayan and Wei Yong were still chatting with Chu Kuanga. Yang Fan used the corner of his eyes to look at Li Dayan's movements until they left. Only then did he turn his attention back to Chu Kuanga and the others. Li Dayan was laughing and crying with Chu Kuanga. From his narration, Yang Fan gradually understood the reason why Chu Kuanga was kicked out of the Imperial Army. It turned out that promotions in the army were also based on seniority. It was much easier for the descendants of the old and meritorious officials to be promoted than ordinary people. A soldier without any background would have to put in 100 times more effort and achieve 100 times more meritorious service than those with status and background. Chu Kuanga and Li Dali were born as commoners. With their martial arts skills, they fought bravely and achieved many meritorious services. That was how they were promoted step by step and gradually became mid-level officers in the Imperial Army. Because they had the same background, they appreciated each other and became very close friends. Li Dayan had a bad habit of drinking as much as his life. Once, when they were on duty in the palace, although Li Dayan did not drink at night, he had a hangover at noon. The effects of the alcohol had not dissipated and his body still reeked of alcohol. In the end, he was discovered by the patrolling general. This matter should be punished, but it was not a big crime. However, the general wanted to place his trusted aide in the army, but Li Dayan had outstanding meritorious service and his trusted aide could not be put on the stage, so he had no excuse. Because of this, he made a big fuss over a small matter, so he was dismissed and a series of punishments came. Originally, the matter should have ended here. After all, it was Li Dayan who was at fault first. Although Chu Kuanga regretted that his brother had lost his future because of his addiction to alcohol, it was not good for him to speak up for him. However, after the general's trusted aide took over Li Dayan's position, he saw Li Dayan as a thorn in his side and targeted him at all times, suppressing him. The rules in the army were much stricter than those in the local areas, and the rules were also much stricter. There were many ways to humiliate and oppress someone. Li Dayan was humiliated in every way possible, but he had to swallow his anger. However, Chu Kuanga endured it again and again. He could not stand it any longer and stood up for his brother. He first quarreled with the officer, and then they started fighting. It was also because the kid could not take the beating, and Chu Kuanga was so angry that he used more force. That person was actually crippled by Chu Kuanga's punches and kick. This time, the matter was blown out of proportion. Although it was not uncommon for private fights to happen in the army, the situation was serious when it was blown out of proportion. Fortunately, Chu Kuanga had saved the life of his immediate superior on the battlefield back then. At this time, he stood up for justice and mediated on his behalf, forcefully suppressing the matter. In the end, Chu Kuanga was spared the punishment of being exiled, but he was still whipped 300 times and chased out of the barrack. Li Dayan was ashamed and ashamed. All these years, whenever he had time, he would search everywhere. However, he really did not expect Chu Kuanga to be hiding in the streets, so he could not find out his whereabouts at all. Today, when he saw Chu Kuanga again, Li Dayan was both happy and guilty. He could not help but cry when he talked about his sadness. Chu Kuanga, Wei Yong, and Yang Fan had to comfort him instead. Li Dayan pulled Chu Kuanga and was asking him about his experiences in the past few years. Qiu Shenji and Xue Huai walked out side by side, followed by the bow-striking experts. Qiu Shenji stood firmly, and his sharp eyes swept across the monks on the bow-striking field. He smiled and said, "Master Xue, it is not that I am boasting, but every year, my bow-striking team loses to the Tubo people, but this second place is still firmly in our hands. Master Xue is a person with great ability, but in the way of bow-striking, your disciples may not be as good as the military elites like me." Qiu Shenji's cold eyes swept across, and he pointed at Chu Kuanga and said, "Perhaps only this burly man can compete with my subordinates. As for the others, he." Qiu Shenji laughed and shook his head. Xue Huai's chest was open, and he really had the appearance of an unrestrained monk. After hearing Qiu Shenji's words, he laughed and said, "Old Qiu, if you really have good eyesight, then no matter what you say, I have nothing to say. Unfortunately, you have misjudged this time. In my class of disciples, the strongest is not 19, but 17. Xue Huai proudly called out, 17, come forward and greet General Qiu. Yang Fan hurriedly went forward and bowed with his palms together, and said, Little Monk Hong 17, greets General Qiu. Qiu Shenji's curly beard was like a halberd, and it made his not-too-tall body look incomparably majestic. His tiger-like eyes shone brightly, and he carefully looked up and down at Yang Fan, and said in surprise, Master Xue, this is your number one expert? Xue Huai puffed out his chest and said proudly, That's right. This is my 17th disciple, and he is now the head of the temple. Old Qiu, you can't judge a book by its cover, don't look down on him. This disciple of mine has reached the acme of perfection in the art of bow striking. When Princess Taiping saw him, she also tried every means possible to recruit him. Chapter 120. Oh! Qiushenji was moved and said, Princess Taiping's eyes are very good. It seems that this boy has some ability to make the princess think so highly of him. However, Kuju and bow striking are different after all. Your disciple is good at Kuju, but he may not be a bow striking master. Unconvinced, Xue Huai said, I have requested an edict from the Empress to invite you, the archery masters of the Imperial Army, here. I want to let you experience it. Qiushenji smiled and said, Okay, then let's have a match. Qiushenji waved his hand, and the high-spirited warriors behind him strode forward. Li Dayan and Wei Yong, who were still reluctant to part with Chu Kuanga, also said their goodbyes and ran into the formation. Qiushenji said proudly, These 10 people are the bow-striking masters that I have carefully selected from the 16 guards of the North and South offices. This year, they will go to the palace to participate in the competition. Master Xue, I will not be lenient when we fight. Xue Huai was a naturally optimistic person. He did not care about his strength and always felt that he had the ability to compete with such a strong team, so he said, That's what I want you to do. 17, 19, you guys get ready too. Yang Fan, Chu Kuanga, Hong 1, Hong 6, and other White Horse Temple monks who were good at bow striking also stood up and faced the 10 people. The officers on the other side looked at the group of bald monks with disdain on their faces. However, they couldn't show it because of Xue Huai. Qiushenji said, You guys get ready and fight first. Let me see how good Master Xue is at bow striking. His eyes fell on Chu Kuanga, and he said hesitantly, You? I seem to have seen you before? Chu Kuanga stepped forward. He was wearing a monk's robe, but he gave a military salute and said respectfully, Great General, I am Chu Kuanga. I used to be the Right Guard cavalry officer. Qiushenji's eyes brightened and he said, Chu Kuanga, not bad. I remember you. You were the best bow-striking master in our army. Then how did you? Chu Kuanga said sadly, I offended my superior and was kicked out of the Imperial Army. Qiushenji shook his head. I see. What a pity. His eyes suddenly brightened as he said, At that time, I was the provincial governor of Dai province and was beyond my reach. Now that I have returned to the capital, are you willing to return to the Imperial Army? This general can still make this decision. Before Chu Kuanga could say anything, Xue Huai had already laughed out loud and said, Old Qiu, I didn't expect you to learn from Taiping and come to steal my family's corner. Haha, I was just about to ask you to recall 19 back to the Imperial Army. However, I can't do it now. He is still a member of the White Horse Temple. No matter what, we can talk about it after the Shang Yuanju competition. Qiushenji smiled and said, It's best if Teacher Xue is willing to let him go. Alright, leave this matter to me. Xue Huai chuckled and said, I originally wanted to entrust this matter to you, so you won't be able to shirk it even if you want to. It's not just him, I have a few other disciples who can't focus on worshipping Buddha and want to join the army to be warriors. When the time comes, I'll also entrust this matter to you. We'll discuss this matter in detail later. Quickly let them compete. I want to see how their skills are after these days of hard training. The members of the 2 teams immediately made their preparations. They tightened their leggings, tied their headscarves, fastened their belts, and arranged their saddles. As Chu Kuanga tied his leggings, he said to Yang Fan in a low voice, I have left the army for a few years, so I don't know how strong the Ju masters in the army are now. However, Li Da and Wei San are among them, so they shouldn't be weak. Among us, the only ones who can really fight with them are you and me. When we fight later, we can't be greedy and seek victory. We have to let the others fight with them. It doesn't matter if we lose this time. We can find their weaknesses and continue training. Yang Fan nodded and said, I also think so. Don't worry, if we really want to win, I'm afraid we will lose miserably. Keep your cool and see how capable they are before making any further plans. Okay. Yang Fan tidied up his clothes and was about to turn around to tie his ponytail when he saw someone walk over and swiftly tie up his ponytail. Seeing that Yang Fan was looking at him, he opened his mouth and smiled at Yang Fan. The person who had come was Ma Qiao. Compared to his usual self, he didn't seem to have changed at all, but Yang Fan could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. There was a bit of seriousness, a bit of perseverance, and a bit of clarity. Perhaps, after yesterday's words, he had really thought through something. Yang Fan said, "Your riding skills are not good, so you can't compete today." "I know." Ma Qiao smiled and said, "I'm not made for this, so it's useless to train. I've thought about it. After the Shangyuan Ju competition, I will join the army with you. From tomorrow onwards you will teach me martial arts, okay?" Yang Fan stared at his eyes for a long time, and the corner of his mouth slowly revealed a smile. "Okay. Tomorrow morning, wait for me at the pagoda forest." Ma Qiao winked and smiled. "Are you ready to teach me the 18 fall stained clothes?" Yang Fan glared at him and said unhappily, "When you are 80 years old, I will definitely teach you." Ma Qiao rolled his eyes and said, "When I am 80 years old, what's the point?" Yang Fan gave a flying kick, and Ma Qiao let out a heh and jumped away. Yang Fan laughed and put his hand on the saddle. He jumped up and landed firmly on the back of the horse. In high spirits he shouted, "Go!" and galloped towards the field. Unexpectedly, the match ended in a draw. For the Ju masters of the Imperial Army, this competition was not exciting at all. They had always been the strongest team in the Tang dynasty. Their strongest opponents were the Turks and the Tibetans. Within the Tang dynasty they had always been invincible. As for the motley crew from the White Horse Temple, they did not pay attention at all. Therefore, they were lazy on the field and simply treated this as a friendly competition to deal with their errands. In contrast, the people from the White Horse Temple went all out, especially Chu Kuanga and Yang Fan. Chu Kuanga was the #1 Ju master in the Imperial Army, and Yang Fan could even control the light rattan ball with ease. He was even more skilled at playing polo. When the two of them worked together, it could be said that they were a perfect pair. Coupled with the Imperial Army's laziness, they actually managed to tie the game. Later, the people from the Imperial Army found that there were masters among the monks from the White Horse Temple who could compete with them. When they pulled themselves together and wanted to compete with them, the hourglass ran out and the game was over. Xue Huai, who was a super fan and a super bad ball player, could not understand the clues. Seeing that his team, which had been trained for less than half a year, had actually tied with the strongest team in the Tang dynasty, Xue Huai was so happy that he could not close his mouth. Xue Huai could not help but say to Qiu Shenji, "How is it, old Qiu? My team is very good, right?" "Ah." Qiu Shenji said with a faint smile, "Oh, not bad. It's really not bad to be able to train to this level in such a short period of time. Are you, the chief monk, willing to join the army? If he is willing, I can also find him a position in the army." Qiu Shenji's eyes were very sharp. He could see that Yang Fan was indeed very talented in Ju. It was a waste of talent to keep this kind of talent in the White Horse Temple. If he was brought into the army and trained well, he would definitely become one of the best Ju masters in the Imperial Army. In a team that was already very strong, if there was a super master, the overall strength of the team would increase unimaginably. Maybe the Tang dynasty could change the embarrassing situation of always being the second best. Xue Huai laughed and said, "What? You even like my 17? You guessed it right. He's one of the few people that I want to ask you to arrange." Speaking of this, Xue Huai scratched his bald head and said, "Damn it, I suddenly feel a little reluctant to part with him." Xue Huai waved his hand and stopped thinking about this problem. He stretched his neck and shouted, "Reception, reception!" The poor reception monk could not receive the pilgrims in the front hall, so he became the abbot's errand boy. As soon as he heard the shout, he hurriedly ran in front of the abbot and said, "Abbot, what are your orders?" Shui Huai said, "Go and quickly prepare some good wine and meat. I am very happy today, and want to drink to my heart's content with General Chiu." This White Horse Temple was a peaceful place for Buddhism. Ever since Master Huai became the abbot, he had already broken all the precepts except for sex. The reception monk was already used to this. After hearing Shui Huai's order, he quickly ran out. Shui Huai's abbot's meditation hall was very large. The banquet was held in the meditation room. Qiu Shenji and Shui Huai sat on the meditation bed while the others sat on cattail hassocks. There were 2 rows of tables on the green brick floor. The 10 monks of the White Horse Temple sat on the left side, while the 10 generals of the Imperial Army sat on the right. Yang Fan was the chief monk of the White Horse Temple. He sat on the chief seat on the left side and was only 1 step away from Qiushenji. Yang Fan's heart couldn't help but pound. He had to pretend to be calm even though his enemy was right next to him. As soon as the banquet started, Li Dayan and Wei Yong ran to Chu Kuanga's side and respectfully toasted him. Then Li Dayan simply sat next to Chu Kuanga and squeezed in with him. The other generals and officers were very curious about this monk that even General Chiu recognized. After Wei Yong returned to his seat, he told them about Chu Kuanga's background. Among these people, some of the older ones had never seen Chu Kuanga before, but they had heard of his reputation. When they heard that he was the #1 expert in the Imperial Army, several officers stood up and toasted him. Chu Kuanga didn't dare to be careless and quickly stood up to return the salute. Immediately after, these people toasted Yang Fan. Yang Fan's polo skills were truly superb. Although these officers were proud of their archery skills, they had to admit that Yang Fan's horsemanship wasn't as good as theirs. His ability to seize opportunities was even slightly inferior to theirs. However, as long as his cane touched the polo ball, his ability to use it freely was much better than theirs. Seeing them toasting back and forth, it was quite lively. Qiushenji laughed loudly and said, "Just now, Teacher Shui mentioned to me that after the Upper Yuanju competition, Chu Kuanga will be allowed to return to the Imperial Army. This little brother that you all admire will also return to secular life and join my army. In the future, you will all be fellow brothers. Who knows, you might even become partners in the archery field. Everyone will soon be a family. Why don't you exchange your names and get to know each other?" When the 10 archery masters heard Qiushenji's words, they immediately became lively and raised their cups to announce their names. When Yang Fan heard this, he was really shocked. It turned out that more than half of these 10 people were the children of prominent officials. Chapter 121. Seated at the seat of honor was a young man of 25 or 26. His hair was dark red, his skin fair, his nose sharp, his eyes light blue, and his facial features handsome. It was obvious at a glance that he was a Hu. Because he had a different appearance from the other generals, Yang Fan had been paying more attention to him from the very start. During the battle on the battlefield, he had been the bravest of the Imperial Army. He was happily gnawing on a piece of lamb when he heard Qiushenji say that they would be exchanging names. Wiping his mouth and hands with a towel, he heartily cupped his fists to the monks and loudly said, "Venerable masters, this one is Ashina Huzeluo. There is a Han called Luokadi. Please advise me." Qiushenji stroked his beard and said, "Huzeluo is the great general of the Right Guard and Protector General Mengqi. He is in charge of the 5 tribes of Nushibai. Haha, in terms of official rank, Huzeluo is above this old man. But this time, we are not leading an army in battle, but competing in martial prowess, so there is no need to compare ranks in the army. This old man has the word old, and General Huzeluo has allowed this old man to sit at the seat of honor, haha." Although Qiushenji spoke very politely, his expression did not show the proper respect. This was because Hüseluo was the current Khagan of the Western Turks. After the schism of the Turks, the Western Turks had gradually declined in power while the Eastern Turks had risen once more. Under the pressure of the Eastern Turks, the Western Turks had been forced to rely on the Tang dynasty for protection, and the Tang dynasty needed to support the Western Turks in restraining the Eastern Turks, so it had taken him and his tribe in. Hüseluo was relying on the Tang for protection. No matter what official position the Tang dynasty gave him, it was just an empty title. He could only truly command his own people. Although Qiushenji's official rank was slightly lower than his, he was a trusted aide of Empress Wu and the great general of the Golden Guards. His authority was far above Hüseluo's, so he naturally did not need to listen to him. Sitting on the second seat after Hüsero was a tall and sturdy man in his 30s. This man had thick eyebrows, a wide mouth, and a squarish face. After Hüsero finished speaking, he smiled and cupped his fists. He simply and clearly introduced himself. I am Xuena, the current commander of the Right Imperial Guard. The third person was short and stocky. His facial features were rather flat, but his eyes were extremely sharp. He also cupped his fists and said, "This one is Li Zhan, currently holding the position of commander of the Northern Gate Guards." The fourth person was tall and sturdy. Even sitting down, he was as majestic as a mountain. His figure was comparable to Chu Kuanga. His nose was high and his eye sockets were deep. It seemed that he also had some Western region's bloodline. Sure enough, he introduced himself and said, "I am Yi Huli, the current general of the Left Feathered Forest Guard." The fifth person had a clear and fair complexion. He lacked the fierceness of a martial artist and had more of the elegance of a scholar. However, Yang Fan clearly remembered that this person's fighting style was very fierce on the court. It was completely different from his current elegance. He also smiled and cupped his fists at the monks opposite him, saying, "I am Di Guangyuan, the current general of the Fengchen Guards." The sixth person looked to be around the same age as Yang Fan. He was also not yet 20 years old. His facial features were regular, his eyes were clear, and he had a very likable and handsome face. He smiled and cupped his fists, saying, "I am Wang Tongjiao, the current general of the Left Guard Gueryi." After these six people were Wei Yong, Li Dayan, Lu Yen, and Gao Chu. Among these four, Wei Yong was a captain, Li Dayan was a general, and Lu Yen and Gao Chu had the lowest rank. From the looks of it, the seats of these people were arranged according to their ranks. Among these four people, Wei Yong and Li Dayan were already familiar with Yang Fan. Lu Yen was a young man of about 26 or 27 years old. His lips were slightly pursed, and his expression was slightly cold. The other captain, Gao Chu, was a few years younger than Lu Yen. He had delicate features and was very handsome. After he introduced himself to the monks opposite him, he winked at Yang Fan and said with a smile, "Others don't know the reputation of the head monk, but I have long heard of the head monk's illustrious name." Yang Fan was surprised, saying, "When did Brother Gao recognize me?" Gao Chu said with a smile, "Today is the first time we have met, but I have long heard of the head monk's name from my younger sister. My younger sister is proud and arrogant, and has never been willing to submit to others. However, she sincerely admires the head monk's cupping technique." Yang Fan hesitated, saying, "May I know who Brother Gao's younger sister is?" Gao Chu said, "My younger sister, Gao Ing, is now a female guard in the palace. When the head monk goes to the palace to play cupping, the ball has been broken from under my younger sister's feet more than once. My younger sister was so angry that she kept crying at me when she came back. Why is the head monk pretending not to know her?" Yang Fan cried out involuntarily, "Ah, I remember now. So that young lady is Brother Gao's younger sister. Haha, your younger sister's cupping technique is also quite brilliant. I am very impressed." Lu Yen joked, "Listening to what you said, it is indeed a scene of no discord, no concord. Gao Chu, I remember that your younger sister hasn't been betrothed yet. Look at the head monk's appearance and talent. Do you want to acknowledge him as your younger sister's son-in-law? Everyone in the hall laughed when they heard this, and they all started to talk at once. Gao Chu was also a forthright person, so he didn't feel offended. He laughed and said, "My younger sister is a military officer in the inner guards. She is more promising than this older brother of mine. If you want to be my younger sister's son-in-law, you should at least be a general." Their banter was originally nothing serious. Although Yang Fan was wearing a kasaya, he had clearly said that after the Lantern Festival, he would renounce asceticism and join the army. However, this was the abbot's meditation hall, and Yang Fan was still a monk wearing a kasaya. Moreover, he was the head monk of the White Horse Temple. Their banter made Taoist Ijua, who was serving wine and meat to the side, unhappy. He stood in the corner, stroked his goatee, shook his head, and sighed. He muttered to himself, "Alas! What a mess, a foul atmosphere." After everyone laughed and chatted for a while, Qiu Shenji took over the conversation and introduced the people who had given their surnames. Originally, when he heard their self-introductions, all of them were generals in the army. Yang Fan didn't think much of it, but now that he heard their backgrounds, he couldn't help but be moved. Huzeluo was the current Kaghan of Juju. Needless to say, he was the leader of the 5 tribes of New Shibi, a hereditary Turkic noble. The rest of them were all from noble families. Xue Na, the son of the famous general Xue Ringui of the Tang dynasty. Li Zhan, the son of the former prime minister Li Yifu. Yi Huli, the son-in-law of the Right Featherwood Guard General Li Duozhua. Di Guangyuan, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Works and the son of the Jiangnan inspector Di Renji. Wang Tongjiao, a direct descendant of the Wang clan of Taiyuan. Only the remaining 4 people, Wei Yong, Li Dayan, Lu Yen, and Gao Chu, didn't seem to have any illustrious family background, so Qiu Shenji didn't deliberately introduce them. After listening to Qiu Shenji introduce the family background of these people, Chu Tiange couldn't help but lean closer to Yang Fan. He said in a low voice, "These people all have huge families behind them. I can see that they really admire your skills. You might as well make friends with them. This will be very beneficial to your future." Yang Fan smiled and didn't say anything. He just quickly glanced at Qiu Shenji, who was sitting cross-legged on the luohan bed. He thought to himself, "I still don't know how long I will stay in the officialdom." Qiu Shenji didn't notice Yang Fan's meaningful glance. He put his hands on his knees and said to the imperial guards, "Just now I have discussed with Master Xue. You will all stay in the White Horse Temple for the next few days and focus on practicing bow hitting. Occasionally, you will exchange pointers with the people of the White Horse Temple. When the bow hitting competition is over, you will all return to the headquarters. As for General Huzeluo," Qiu Shenji looked inquiringly at Luo Kadi. Luo Kadi bowed and said with a smile, "Kadi is only a bow-hitting player selected by the Imperial Guards. Everything will follow General Qiu's arrangements." Qiu Shenji laughed and said, "That's good. If General has nothing important to do, you can also stay here. After I leave, General Huzeluo will be in charge of everything here. After a while, you can go back and see if there is anything that has not been explained clearly or if there is anything that needs to be taken. From tomorrow onwards, you will stay in the White Horse Temple until the Lantern Festival." Early in the morning, the trees, grass, and stone towers in the forest were all covered with a layer of pale autumn frost. The morning mist lingered in the forest, and the sky was gray. The morning stars had already disappeared, and the sun had not yet risen. Ma Qiao held a Buddhist commandment blade in his hand. He faced the air in front of him and very seriously slashed with it. Today, he woke up early in the morning. He was full of joy, thinking that Yang Fan was going to teach him some profound martial arts. He was also very worried that he would not be able to comprehend it with his aptitude. He did not expect that what Yang Fan taught him was actually so simple. Yang Fan took a Buddhist commandment blade, stood still, and slashed with it. He then threw the blade to him and told him to practice slashing. This morning, he did not do anything else. He only swung the blade, slashed, sheathed the blade, and swung it again. After he had slashed dozens of times, Yang Fan, who was watching from the side with his arms crossed, walked over. He told him the posture of holding the blade, the angle of the slash, the strength of the blade, and the secrets of breathing when performing this series of actions. After he had memorized it, he still wanted him to continue slashing, and then he went into the forest to practice martial arts. So simple? This is martial arts? With his back bare, he chopped mechanically and impatiently. Ma Qiao gradually became confused. He did not know when, but Yang Fan came back from the morning mist and stood quietly to watch him practice. When Ma Qiao's energy was no longer focused and the slash in his hand became a little sluggish, he suddenly said, "In fact, there is nothing magical about martial arts. Practicing martial arts is also not a very interesting thing. In the final analysis, there are only two things to practice martial arts. One is the body and the other is the skills. The body needed to train one's strength, making one's strength far surpassing that of an ordinary person. The body needed to train one's reaction speed, making one's six senses far sharper than that of an ordinary person. As for techniques, they needed to be refined and refined by generations of predecessors. What I want you to practice now is the strength of your arms, waist, and legs, as well as the cooperation and tacit understanding between them. You must practice each slash according to the method I teach you. That is not only for the body but also for the skills of wielding the blade and breathing. In the past, I stood on a stake in the middle of a huge wave for 3 years. If you want to stand out, then continue to practice. The more you suffer now, the more blessings you will enjoy in the future. If you can't persevere, then forget it." Ma Qiao took a deep breath, spread his legs, and plunged his feet again. His slash was slower than before, but each slash was very serious. He completely followed Yang Fan's instructions. Whether it was the posture of holding the blade or the movement of drawing the blade, he used all his strength in each slash. 1 slash, 1 slash. 100 slashes, 100 slashes. His arm was already swollen, and his ligaments seemed to be pulled. If it were not for the pain from his shoulder and arm that stimulated him, he would almost think that the arm that held the blade no longer belonged to him. But he still gritted his teeth and endured. His movements became slower and slower. Sometimes after drawing the blade, he needed to take a few breaths to adjust his whole body's strength and strive to make a slash that satisfied him. The sun came out, shining on his body that was covered in sweat. The sunlight reflected off his sweat, making it sparkle. He still gritted his teeth and persevered, seriously slashing out with each slash. The bell rang, the sound of the morning bell echoing throughout Luoyang City. This morning, perhaps in a certain workshop, there was a certain shopkeeper with eye ulcers, yawning like a hippopotamus, trembling as he went to open the door. But that person would definitely not be called Ma Qiao. Chapter 122. Every morning, the monks of White Horse Temple and the Imperial Army would hold a match against each other. In the afternoon, they would train separately. For the monks of the White Horse Temple, competing against such a strong team was definitely a process of rapid improvement. Almost every time a match ended, they could learn something or comprehend something from it. These experiences might not be immediately transformed into substantial improvement, but they would be remembered in your mind and be digested and absorbed. At that time, your strength would be greatly improved. For the Imperial Army experts, such as Xue Na and Di Guangyuan, the matches against the monks of White Horse Temple were not completely useless. They were carefully selected from the experts of the Imperial Army. In the usual internal confrontations, they were clear about the level of other people. However, they were not familiar with Yang Fan and Chu Kuanga. These two people, one had a rough fighting style, while the other had exquisite technique. They were the type of people that they were unfamiliar with in the past, so every time they fought, in order to strengthen the confrontation, they would withdraw half of their team members and only send out 5 people. With 5 people against 10, they would fight with all their strength. This way, the strength of both sides could more or less be balanced. These days, Ma Qiao was almost completely ignored. No one noticed where he was. He had never been the focus of other people's attention. Every day, Ma Qiao would practice martial arts in the silent pagoda forest. When Yang Fan and the others came down from the court, they would be covered in dirt and sweat. At this time, Ma Qiao would also come out of the pagoda forest. He was also wet as if he had just been fished out of the water. There was a mountain spring behind the White Horse Temple. Even though it was a bit cold in autumn, it was still a bit warm at noon. In addition, their bodies were strong, so they didn't feel cold while bathing naked at the edge of the spring. After a morning of matches, Yang Fan and the others came to the spring in 2s and 3s to bathe. At this time, Ma Qiao also came out of the pagoda forest with tired step. Yang Fan and Ma Qiao stood in a water hole to bathe. Yang Fan scooped up half a bucket of water and poured it on his head. Then, he picked up a loofah and rubbed his chest. He said to Ma Qiao, "I am relieved that you are so hard-working. However, going too far is just as bad as not going far enough. It's enough to practice in the morning. Don't practice in the afternoon and evening. Later, I'll teach you how to train your waist and legs. Come, help me rub my back." Ma Qiao took the melon pulp. Yang Fan leaned against a rock. Ma Qiao rubbed his back vigorously and said, "Good. After practicing for a few days, I feel that there is indeed something different when I use my saber. I can't explain it clearly. It's not that I've suddenly become much stronger, it's just that I feel. In the past, I could only use the strength of my arm when I swung my saber. Now, it seemed as though all the strength of my body could be concentrated in my hand. Not only is his attack powerful, but his speed is also extremely fast. The method you taught is indeed brilliant. I think I'll just concentrate on practicing martial art. After all, the army is a place where ability is the most important. Even Xuan Na, Di Guangyuan, and the others, although they have an amazing father, they also have real ability. Only by training a body full of real ability can they have the opportunity to stand out." Yang Fan smiled and said, "That's right. Later, I'll accompany you back to Xiuwen workshop and tell Auntie about your plan. Auntie will definitely be very happy when she finds out. It will also save her the trouble of always playing with those little things. Auntie is old and her eyesight isn't good. If you want to marry a wife, it's better to rely on your own ability." After Ma Qiao finished rubbing Yang Fan's back, it was Yang Fan's turn to rub his back. Ma Qiao leaned against the rock and half bent his body as he said, "Yeah, I'll listen to you. You have a body full of good ability. It seems that Great General Qiu also appreciates you. In the future, you will definitely have a bright future. Us brothers will join the army together. One day, we will all become great generals, bringing honor to our ancestors and blessing our descendants. Haha, you're right to think that way. Brother Qiao, this is an important opportunity in your life. You must grasp it." "What are you talking about? You're laughing so happily." Chu Kuanga walked over the stream and asked with a smile. Without waiting for them to answer, he said, "Li De and Wei San have not seen me for many years. They want to invite me out for a drink. Lu Yen and Gao Chu also want to come along. How about it? Do you and Brother Qiao want to come along?" Yang Fan asked, "Have you decided on a place to go?" Chu Kuanga said, "The two of them grew up in the army and are not familiar with the restaurants in Luoyang. The places I usually go to are small restaurants. Once we leave the White Horse Temple, we can just look for one." Yang Fan said with a smile, "I know a place. The environment is quiet and the food is good." Chu Kuanga smiled and said, "Okay, then I'll trouble you to lead the way." Yang Fan patted Ma Qiao's buttocks and said with a smile, "Don't pout. If you keep rubbing it, the skin will fall off." Quickly put on your clothes and let's go eat. Yang Fan washed up and put on his clothes. He carried the wooden bucket and washing utensils back to the White Horse Temple. Before he entered the meditation room, Wang Tongjia rode a white horse and greeted him with a smile. Xiao Fan, General Luo, Brother Shui, we're going to the Golden Hairpin Drunk to eat. Do you want to go together? Yang Fan had been in contact with them for a few days. He had already discovered that the 10 Imperial Army archery masters were basically divided into 2 groups. Luo Kadi, Shui Na, Di Guangyuan, and the other children of the officials were one group. Li Deyin, Wei Yong, Gao Chu, and Lu Yen were the other group. This group did not mean that the 2 sides were opposed to each other, but that they would naturally gather together. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Different origins, family backgrounds, and statuses naturally formed a gap between them. Therefore, they formed different social circles. Yang Fan was startled and replied, "Unfortunately, I've already made an appointment with Brother Kwanga and the others to go out for a drink. If there's a chance, I'll drink with Brother Shui and Brother Wang again." Wang Tongjiao was slightly surprised. She laughed and said, "All right, then let's meet up another day. We'll be leaving first." At the temple gate, Luo Kadi, Shui Na, and the others were already on their horses. It seemed like they were waiting for him. Wang Tongjiao whipped her horse and left. Ma Qiao anxiously said, "You idiot, they invited you with good intentions. Why did you refuse? These people are either the sons of nobles or the disciples of generals and ministers. If you can make friends with them, it will be very beneficial to your future. Why did you?" Yang Fan lightly said, "Since I've already promised to go out with Brother Chu, how can I break the promise? Let's go and get ready. It's time to go out." At this time, Chu Kwanga had already walked out of his residence. He saw the scene of Wang Tongjiao and Yang Fan talking from afar. Immediately after, they spurred their horses and left the White Horse Temple. Chu Kwanga walked over and asked, "What happened to Commandant Wang?" Ma Qiao blurted out, "They invited Xiao Fan to go out for a drink, but that idiot refused." Chu Kwanga was greatly surprised. He looked deeply at Yang Fan and said, "These people are either rich or noble. You really shouldn't have refused. If you could become brothers with them, it would be of great help to your career. We brothers don't need to be outsiders. If you want to drink, won't there be plenty of opportunities?" Yang Fan smiled and said, "Big Brother Chu, are you trying to talk like that? Don't say any more. Look, Brother Li and Brother Wei are already ready. Let's go." In a quiet forest on Guide Lane in the south of Luoyang, the small 2-story red building still stood there. The trees in the forest rustled, and the evergreen trees were also dyed with the color of late autumn. The colors darkened, and as a result, the small red building lost some of its beauty, revealing a bit of desolation. Usually, this restaurant had very few customers. Only a few frustrated scholars and low-ranking officials with rough official careers would come here to grieve over the hardships of life, recite poems and compose prose to vent their bitter feelings. At this time, the number of customers was even fewer. When Yang Fan, Chu Tiange, Wei Yong, Li Dayan, Ma Qiao, and the others rushed over, the small building was empty. There was not a single customer. The old shopkeeper didn't show any surprise at the sudden arrival of 7 guests. It was probably because living in this forest for a long time had made him open-minded and unworldly. He seemed to be indifferent to favors or disgraces. This was exactly what Yang Fan and the others wanted. Because there had always been very few customers, the tavern did not have enough ingredients and did not have any rich dishes. However, the wine here was still quite good. With a few plates and 2 jars of wine, the 7 of them dominated the 2-story building. They drank and talked loudly, very relaxed and happy. "Big brother, this first cup of wine, this little brother will first toast you. This little brother has not touched wine for many years, but today, this little brother must break the rule and drink to my heart's content. This little brother, I—" At this point, Li Dayan's voice suddenly choked up. 2 lines of tears flowed down his hairy face. Chu Kuanga frowned and said unhappily, Dayan, what are you doing? Don't mention that matter in the future. It is a good thing that we brothers have reunited. If you always talk about this matter, I will feel very uncomfortable. Wei Yong hurriedly raised his cup and said, Dayan, Big Brother Chu is about to return to the Imperial Army. We brothers are going to be together again. This is a happy occasion. Today, let's congratulate Big Brother and treat it as an early welcome. Don't cry about such a happy occasion, it's so unlucky. Good, good, good. Today is Big Brother's happy day. Brother won't say anything else. Let's toast Big Brother. Li Dayan raised his cup with tears in his smile, and drank it in one gulp with trembling lips. Chu Kuanga patted him on the shoulder, and also raised his cup to drink. The other 3 each drank a cup. Wei Yong raised his cup and proposed, This second cup of wine is for Brother Yang. Brother, after a year, we will be fellow brothers. Master Shui and Commander Chiu think so highly of you. Once you enter the army, your future will be limitless and enviable. You must drink this cup of wine. Yang Fan raised his cup with a smile and said, Third Brother Wei, among us brothers, I am the youngest and the most inexperienced. How can I deserve a toast from you guys? I should be the one toasting you guys. Speaking of Master Shui and Commander Chiu's high regard, the martial arts in the arena is just a small way to entertain people and is not worth mentioning. But it can't compare to the contributions that you all have made on the battlefield. My brothers are all commoner clans, but to have such a status today, it is all because of your military exploit. This little brother admires you from the bottom of his heart.